we are here. It's these ones that I want to look at, because these are the ones that had the orange in it, if I recall. Now it's just a question of, are they still here? Let's have a look. Kind of boring. I may change my mind if I don't like what they have, because that orange stuff is really what I was going for. That's the reason I like this stuff. I have to do a couple of epoxy fills in that, in this. Could make that work. That might be the one just because it's the most graphic-y looking, but we'll see if there's something else hanging around that also tickles my fancy. It's like a hologram almost. And this is why this is my happy place. But look how pretty that is. It's like a 3D map. There you go. Those aren't big enough. Yeah. All right, let's go find that other piece. They're not even 1 3/4, man. This makes me nervous. I need you to start saying these names so that it sounds fancy. No, it's not the right color. Bugger! Now I'm screwing myself on this. Freaking millimeters.
Are you in the system?
I should be.
What's the name?
We work for a company called CNC Labs.
Okay, great.
And they make like hobby grade CNCs out of Waterloo.
Cool.
Pretty much everything's locally sourced, so all the rails, they're custom extrudes and everything else. They have a 48 by 30 with works for bigger ones in the way, and so we do all the content for them. Yeah, I figured we'd come here and grab some supplies and give you guys a shout out too, because you've been around for a little while.
Yeah.
45 years almost.
You've been around longer than I've been alive.
Oh,
I'm 40.
you're a young kid.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I said. I go, I hope I look this good at 91. That's ridiculous. So, let's go. Clunk. That's good. You just taking video of me walking to my truck and opening my door? Am I supposed to get in? Hey there, CNCers! Scott here again for CNC Labs. This is video 2 in the Great Guitar Builder series videos that we are doing. In this one, I'm going to try and run you through the steps that I used to export the body that we modified in the first video. We are going to import it into VCarve, and instead of starting the file right from scratch, I've left some kind of reminders in here for myself more than anything, so I don't forget to share it with you guys. So you can kind of ignore some of it. I'll draw attention to the things when I need to, and I'll try and explain it as best I can so that it's nice and clear and you can follow along, because ultimately that's the purpose of the video. So the first thing, and I think I said it in the last video, and pretty importantly, is here's our lovely piece of black limba, recently purchased from Exotic Woods in Burlington, my favorite wood store around. It's got some absolutely really stunning grain on it, and I'm thrilled that some of this orange is going to show through, which you may not be able to see in this, but you'll see it eventually. So here we are on Onshape. In the first video, we rolled through all of the modifications and verifications. Whoo! No. All of the changes, modifications you can make if you have not ordered the same spec product that I have. Hopefully you've done that. If you have, then you should have your file saved, and you are now going to export your entire body into a 3D model, which is an STL file, which we'll then import into VCarve. So the easiest way to do that is to go down here to the bottom where it says parts, which is the Telecaster body, which will be that whole entity. And if you right click and export, it will bring up this awesome tab, which will say the name of what's going on, the format, your units. So depending on if you're a millimeter, a imperial, or a metric person, you figure that out. Resolution fine is wonderful, and export. So I'm going to stick with inches because that's typically what I work in, but unfortunately I will disclaimer this entire, video series, I bounce back and forth regularly. Just because I find millimeters really handy sometimes, and inches are my default. So we'll get through it together, I promise. So, Telecaster body, Tele body, I'm just gonna get rid of that. And I'm actually gonna give it a V4 just for my sake, because this is actually the 4th body I've done, and it keeps it clear up here. Clear as it can be. It's gonna download the file for you. Yay, it actually threw that on my desktop, which is not where I want it, so I'm gonna go and put it in the folder that it's supposed to be in, which is my body 4 STL folder. There's probably a body 3 one in there because I copied it. There we go. Fortunately, that is all there is for Onshape. Yay! So we'll bounce over to VCarve. Alrighty, so now we are going to import that model that we just exported from Onshape. Sorry, I was getting 3 programs mixed up. And we're gonna go to this little import 3D model. Again, like I said, it's in my body 4 and it's in my STL. So I'm gonna import that. Hit open, and you get this crazy pop-up. And it defaulted because I was, again, back and forthing between inches and millimeters. So I am going to switch this over to inches. It's gonna make it scale to the right size. So this red outline is the document size that we've already set up. That is my piece of wood. That's again why it's important for it to be accurate, because it's gonna center this on the model right here. Right, so if you click on center to model, model being your piece of wood or your material, then it's gonna center to it. So if it's not the right thickness, it could throw things for a curveball. You know, that's why we try and make sure we have it set up beforehand. It is oriented up, which is to the top, which is good. And that is the right scale for it. So we are going to hit position and import. And here we want to create both sides because we obviously don't want to cut off the bottom half of the model or it won't exist, and that's kind of useless. Depth below top is set to the center, which is fine and should be for yours as well. And so you're going to hit that lovely import button. It's going to do some thinking in. Yay, we have a guitar. So, like I was saying earlier, there are a few little funky things that are going to pop up in my file that won't happen in yours. The first one being I have an extra tabs layer. So this is the original one from my original file. As soon as you create, or as soon as you bring in that model and import it, it's going to automatically create a tabs one. In this case, I can delete this level because I already have them, and I'll get to tabs in just a minute. In the meantime, the next important thing to do after you have imported, first thing, very key, hit this set button over here. And the reason I say that is, if you look at the model position in material, it's not putting any space between the top. So if your material is this thick and your model is this thick, it's putting your model right up here. It's justifying it to the top, I guess, instead of centering it in the middle. Personally, I want it centered in the middle because when it goes to carve, it'll take a little bit off the top, leaving me with a nice surface. It'll take a little bit from the bottom, leaving me with a nice surface. And overall, everything will be great. The tricky part to this is that my model is almost the exact same spec as my wood. I'm not thrilled about that, but we're gonna roll through. So I'm gonna drag this down to the middle, which is what I was about to say. And you'll see that it hits right there, 0.025 millimeters and 0.025 millimeters. We're talking like a sheet of paper, but that's okay because we're gonna be good and it will make sure that everything carves evenly from top and bottom. So that's a big one. Make sure that you go and change that. As far as your rapid Z gaps, the stock stuff in there should be good to go. It just means it's going to move your bit up in the Z axis when it's moving around and not, you know, create what I did with my second guitar body. And we are going to hit OK. Yes, but I do not want to recalculate because, again, that's one of the things that's popping up on my file. I really should have just started from scratch. Oh well, here we are. I'm going to check my notes because I've done a lot of stuff. The next thing that I found helpful is to teach you guys a couple of little buttons if you haven't played with two-sided carving before. The first one being the toggle between single and double-sided. Right now, there's like a fake plane going right through the middle of the model we've just imported. So it's saying, hey, here's what the top side looks like, right? Our top side toggle up here. But there's our bottom side. It looks like just flatness, which isn't always helpful. Sometimes it is. I want to show you that if you hit this little toggle button over here, it will kind of ghost out that plane and it will now show you the backside of your model, which is super duper handy because then you can see what everything's going to look like. Obviously my tabs are in there. Everything that was in that 3D model from Onshape has imported in here and is great. Now, another super handy little feature is if you take your mouse and hover over any part of the model, you will see, and I'm pointing at my screen even though you can't actually see it, but if you look at the bottom kind of right corner of your 3D view, you'll see the numbers change. And if you watch those numbers change, their coordinates to the heights and the X and the Y location and measurement, I guess, of your model. So if you watch when I go along the surface here, you'll see that it's minus 0.25 down like we just did in the setup over there. And if I go into one of the pickup pockets, you'll see it'll go whoop, down to 22.5 millimeters. So it's just showing you the depth relative to the zero plane. Sometimes useful, sometimes not. Just a handy little thing, but it'll work on the backside too, which is really cool. So this is telling you it went down, you know, minus 44.475 millimeters from the top, which is, again, it can come in really handy when you're trying to figure out depths of your bits in particular. We'll get to that later. So we're going to turn that guy off for now, just so we're focusing on the front. As you probably already know, or maybe you don't, the toggle top and bottom side is a handy one to know right here. This will flip you between your front and your back side, and it does automatically flip it for you, so you don't have to worry about going in and doing anything funky rotating. So we're gonna go back to the front side. Now, you guys probably already know about the pinning your toolbar down. That's why this is sticking out. Again, ignore some of the things that you're seeing over here. They are there for my previous file, so I don't forget. And quite honestly, I'm kind of lazy, so I don't have to remember. Last but not least is this arranging views horizontally or vertically. So this is handy when you can click on it, and it will bring up both your 2D view, and your 3D view. So you can kind of see what you're doing while you're doing it. If you want to get rid of one or the other, you can just maximize it and it will get rid of it. And if you want to bring it back, just go back up there. So you can see now in our 2D space that we have indeed imported the Telecaster Body 4 model, which is this guy right here. And if you click on it, you can actually click on it, ironically enough. So I believe the next thing I'm going to talk about is our limit planes. Yes, so our limit planes are imaginary planes that tell your bit how deep to cut and when to stop cutting. So if you want to get really funky, I'm actually going to bring up the double view just so you can see what's going on. I'm actually going to get rid of that for now because I don't really need it. Yoink. There we go. So the limit plane, and this is why I'm going to show you with the 3D view, because you can see that when we enter into it by double clicking on it, we have a few different things we can play with. You can see that it is now highlighted red over here, and you can change the base height of this. Now, this is going to come in super handy. If you can see that this pickup pocket, the neck pocket, and this wire guide pocket are all showing wood texture, which means that it will carve down to that depth. However, you'll see with the bridge pickup and the selector pocket, they're still showing red. That means that it has not gone down to the full depth of what the 3D model has into it. So if you change the base height of this, you'll notice, and I'm gonna go, really? Yep, can't say the word exaggerated. I'm going to really exaggerate this just so you see the immediate result. Boom. Now you see that this has gone to that woody white oak color, and this has as well. It means it's gonna carve the full depth of that pocket. You're not gonna lose any information. Yay, that's a good thing. The bad thing is, and I found this out through experimentation, is it has moved that plane so far down that it's gonna carve the entire side of the guitar as well. So it's not just gonna, go across the surface, drop down for the pocket of the pickup, come back up and go. It's gonna do the side of the body, up, down, up, down. It's a waste of time. I talked about it in the first video. This is my whole hybrid theory. Oh, Linkin Park shout out right there. In the end, the reason why my hybrid theory is, in my opinion, a really cool way of doing it. One, again, it shows off what this machine can do. It also, when I did a straight vector carve versus a 3D model carve, there was a pretty minimal time difference between how long they both took. The advantage to the vector is you can adjust it really fine-tuned right within the software. The disadvantage is you have to go and manually set all those paths. The advantage to using the 3D model is it'll carve out the 3D model with fairly minimal amount of work. The downside is if you have to tweak it, you do have to go back into your software, re-import it, and it's a bit of a pain in the butt. And I found that out through working through the process. This is where my hybrid theory kind of comes in, is the 3D model will carve the pockets and everything else, And then I go in with some vectors to clean up things or to really fine tune things that need to be fine tuned. Where limit planes factor into this is I want to carve out all of these pockets to their full depth, but I don't want to carve the entire side. One, because it's a waste of time, because I'm going to go back in with a vector later and really get a nice, clean, fast cut. And two, and if somebody out there knows the answer to this, please let me know in the comments, because it's been driving the entire, well, maybe not the entire, it's been driving me bonkers. And I'm not going to lie, I've been chatting with Jason quite a bit, asking him, when the limit plane is this deep for the edges, it does this really goofy henpeck thing where it just goes around and henpecks to carve instead of doing this nice profile cut. So my hybrid is a bit of a workaround, but at the end of the day, it netted me some really nice results. So what we're going to do with the limit plane is drop it deep enough so it gets all of the pockets. And I'm going to ignore that it goes all the way around the sides, because I found a bit of a workaround cheat for that, which we'll get into later at some point. So we're going to drop this down just a little wee bit. And because there's so little extra material on this, we just got to drop it down until, I'm trying to zoom in so we can see what's going on. Just until these pockets appear, like I say, that kind of whited out. There we go. So that one's now clear, and now this one's still red, so it's telling me it doesn't have the full depth done. That's okay, because it's not too much further. Let's move that guy over. Ding. Oh, baby. You know, if I was smart, I actually would have just got the measurement out and just done that, but I'm not, so there we go. We have all the pockets clean and clear. It will carve all the way through, and for the time being, we're going to ignore that it's going to carve out all the way around this side. It will, if I don't do a bit of a workaround for the vectors, but I'll teach you that trick. So there's our limit plane for the front. I'm debating in my head whether or not I do all the fronts or if I flip back and forth between the fronts and the backs, because there's a lot of repetitive steps here. The limit plane on the back also needs to be set, much the same way we just did for the front. I'm just gonna go front and then back so that we kind of go through the steps a few times to get people used to things. So we're gonna close out the limit plane. Cool. Now we are going to go and we are going to add our 3D tabs to things. Now, like I said, the only reason I didn't delete my 3D tabs from my original file is because I'm lazy. I will call myself on it. I will own it. I liked how they worked on the last two versions that I did, and I am a bit of a superstitious person, and I didn't want to mess with them, so I left them in as is. The cool part is I can show you how to get some in there, and then I'll just delete those ones and show you the specs for mine. So if you go into your clip art tab, you go to your 3D tabs, and you will see a whole bunch of different 3D tabs, ironically enough, within there. You can use whatever you want. If you drop it in there, you can drag and drop, or you can double click and it will show up in your 2D workspace. And from there, we'll go and edit them much like we just did the limit planes. I think I just used the rectangular, I don't know if I used the 3/4, the half, or the quarter. And if I'm being totally honest, I messed with it a fair amount, so I don't think it really matters. So let's just double click on a 3/4 and it'll drop it right there in the middle of your screen. And you'll see when I drag it out here that there's a cute little 3D tab. The cool part about these is, oh, I didn't mean to rotate it, is you can modify them just like you can a vector. You can click on them and drag them around. You can double click, oh, no, sorry, you don't even have to double click. You just click on them and then you can rotate them, So what I did was, because my stock has a little bit more meat on the sides than the top and the bottom, I decided to throw 1, 2, 3, and you can't really see this one easily until I zoom in, 4 tabs all the way around. The way I look at tabs, especially for something like a guitar, you're trying to dial this thing and you're trying to fine tune it. And I could put a bunch of little wimpy tabs around there, but I want to know that this thing is not going to move when it's being carved out. So I'm using some pretty meaty, hefty tabs. You can see them over here. They're pretty much top to bottom. And I did that because at the end of the day, if I'm using tabs, I have to sand anyways. And if I'm being really blatantly honest, I'm not like so amazing at doing these yet that I'm not gonna have to sand anyways. So I wanna know that that thing's secure. I'm using some big fat meaty tabs, and that's what I did. If you want to experiment, knock yourself out. I hope that you do not have any issues with a guitar body being, gouged because they weren't strong enough. So I used the big chunky ones. From here, I'm gonna bounce over and I'm gonna show you my specs. So here are my tabs. Again, you can rename these if you want to, just like you can any of the things in here. You can right click on them and you can rename them. I've never had to rename a limit plane. I'm sure there's a reason you would, but I'm not going to. And then if you double click on any one of those tabs, it will pop you up into the properties for it. Same thing here. You can modify the shape height and the base height. And I will zoom in over here. It's easier to tell what it does in the 3D one. So we've got this one selected that's showing you highlighted in red. And if you change the shape height, it will do all kinds of really fun stuff. So again, if you want to go a little bit thinner because mine are kind of overkill, you can change your shape height, knock yourself out. If you wanna, again, you probably could go a little bit thinner than I did. I'm just gonna undo back because now I don't remember what it was. See why I left them in there in the first place? Yeah, 15 is a little bit big. I mean, at the end of the day, you could probably drop it to 14. It's not gonna hurt anybody. It's just gonna make it a little bit less on the edge. I'm okay with that. What about 10? I mean, my guitar wasn't moving before. See, I don't trust 10. 13. 13 is my lucky number. Yeah. So you can monkey with those. You can grab them all at once and you can change them all, which is great. So I'm going to highlight them all and make them 13 because it'll just take a little bit away from that edge. I'm okay with that. And truth be told, sorry, memory's coming back from other ones. When I had them right to, hold on, I'm trying to zoom in. When I had them right to this kind of edge of the guitar right there, the profile cut that we're gonna do to cut out the entire thing anyways, cuts through them. So truth be told, it doesn't really matter. So let's put them back to 15 just because I like to, redo steps. Anywho, that is 3D tabs. So again, you can grab them. Oop, I got them all selected, don't I? I do. You can grab them. You can move them to wherever you want. So again, if you found, and a lot of people I watched videos on, they had them right here on the heads or on the neck pocket. Totally cool. If you want it there, you'll just have to obviously adjust the height because it's gonna carve down into there. So the other something to know about with doing two-sided carving is that you can copy things from one side to another and it will incorporate that flip. So just like when we toggle between, sorry, wrong button. Just like when we toggle between our front and our back and it automatically flips for us. If we were to grab, let's say, our 4 3D tabs that we just created, and we want those to be mirrored on the backside, which is what we do want, because I would like them to line up. If you don't want them to, then you don't have to. I want my tabs to all be in the exact same location, so you can select one or all of them. I have my 4 tabs selected, and I want to copy them to the backside, which currently does not have any tabs. It has a couple extra layers, because I just, totally messed this part up, but you'll see there's no tabs here. We flip back to the front, we select those 4, we right click, we copy to the other side, and magically through the power of awesomeness, we have 1, 2, lighter, 3, and 4 tabs on the other side. So they are all nice and mirrored. And when you go up here, you can see that our tabs are nicely uniformly connected. They go through the thickness of it. They're awesome. Again, I've done 2 versions with them this thick, and the guitar has been pretty solid. I mean, some of the parts at the top of the neck part here and at the bottom, actually the bottom was solid when I did it. I think it was solid. Take that. And that was with pine too. So as soon as I do it with like some actual like nice wood, this should be even better. So that is 3D tabs. Let's flip back over to the front side. And now we are going to set up our toolpaths for the front. This is pretty straightforward stuff, which is awesome. So I'm going to bring up my toolpath and I'm going to pin it. And then again, if you hit this, either one of these buttons again, it'll reset them, which is super nice. I close out of this. So I'm going to grab my model. And again, this is where I was talking about. You won't have any of these toolpaths in here because you haven't created any toolpaths yet. I left mine in here just to remember naming, depths, things like that, so that I didn't have to reinvent the wheel, because quite honestly, there's just too many steps and it was easier not to do that. Next on the list is, before we do the 3D model stuff, let's do the indexing. Let's talk about that. When you're doing a 2-sided carve, it could be obviously very easy to lose your XY0 when you go to flip if you don't have something to tell you what you're lining up to. So we're going to basically create, this is actually, I think this is, I found it confusing the first couple times I did it, and then I realized it's actually not that bad, and I'm going to try and run you through it so it's fairly simple. We are going to carve some holes into the top side of our piece of wood. We're going to copy those holes to the back side, just like we did with the 3D tabs. But before we put the piece of wood there to carve those holes, we're going to leave the piece of wood off, and then we're going to tell it to carve the same actual holes into the material surface, into our wasteboard. And the reason we do that is on the front side, we've got those holes. On the wasteboard, we've got the mirrored holes. And then we're going to take some, I have just wooden dowels. They're cut to, I think these are, I can't remember what these are. I think they're an inch actually, because I made the holes just a little bit over. We'll plug the dowels into the holes in our wasteboard. When we flip our board over, our material over, those holes will line up. Boom, it's indexed. It can't rotate, it can't shift. And that's how you know that when you carve your front side, you've got your holes in it, and when you flip it, it locks in. You carve your back side, everything will line up. That profile cut to cut out the guitar, all the through holes for the strings, the tabs, all of that stuff will be lined up really nice. So that's indexing in a nutshell. Lots of videos out there that may give a better explanation than what I just did, but I think that was pretty clear. So what we're going to do is go to our 2D tab. We're going to draw, you can do as many as you want. Some people use 2, 3, 4 seem to be the common number. The thing that stuck out for me when I was doing this was you want to make sure there's a pattern to it that you can't mess up. So if you put, let's say 2 index holes right at the very dead center of this thing, and then you flipped it, but something went sideways, if there wasn't some weird way to say the index holes can't line up, you might be like, oh, this is great, but then you found out you actually made a mistake. So I purposely put them in very weird spots so that it can only index one way. And if I made a mistake, I will find out before I carve the backside and screw up the whole process. So the first thing we're gonna do is measure our dowel. I've already done this. That's why this circle is the size that it is. And if I click on it and I go back to my create vectors, it is 9.5 millimeters. My actual dowel is 9.3 millimeters, so I'm making it just like the tiniest bit so the dowel actually fits. I found if you made it too tight, you had to smash it in there with a hammer, and it's not a lot of fun to do. So I make it just a little wee bit bigger. Okay, there's one, and then I'm gonna double click on it, and I'm gonna hold, is it control that just copies it? Yeah, control and drag when it's moving will allow it to move over, which is good. So I'm gonna throw a random one again over here. And then I'm gonna throw one more. I found 3 was really good because it's, you know, there is no way I can flip this now, right? There, and there. There is no way I can flip that and not have it indexed properly. If it doesn't hit those 3 dowels that are stuck in my surface board, I did something wrong, and at least I've got this front side and maybe I can salvage it. From there, we will create a toolpath for those in just a moment, but before we do that, I'm gonna select the 3 of them, and I'm gonna do the same thing I did with the 3D tabs, and I'm going to copy to the other side. So let's make sure that I don't have any over there. There are none on the back side, because I just moved them. And then we'll just grab these 3, we will copy to the other side, and if we go to the back side, we'll see that it has mirrored them for me. They're in the exact same location. We'll drill into the material. Here, maybe if we do this, it's even more fun. We'll drill into the material. We will remove the material after we've carved the front. We'll drill into the surface, the wasteboard. And then when we go to flip this, the pegs are in the surface board, boop, it will index perfectly and everything will line up nicely. Or that's the theory behind it. So going back to the front side, because it's the first thing that I do in my the way I carve, and again, I've done 3 bodies now, so I'm by no means an expert, but I've worked out some of the kinks, hopefully to help you guys out. I found that doing the index holes on the front first was great. 1, because it's just done and it's simple. 2, I ended up screwing my material down to my wasteboard. You can double-sided tape, you can just clamp, you can hot glue, which I don't like, but some people love. I ended up screwing my material down. And the reason why I found doing the index holes first, I mean, at the end of the day, I kind of can look at my screen and see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 corners that are relatively open, but I'll show you when I go to actually carve it that I outline my index holes just so I can kind of put them there, and then I screw my board down, and I found that it didn't move at all, and it just kind of gave me a bearing of where everything was. So we're gonna create a toolpath for these. We're gonna have the 3 index holes that we've just drawn selected. You're gonna click on the profile toolpath. It's gonna bring up this. If you're in millimeters or centimeters or whatever you're using, great, it will be there. I needed this to be inches because this was something I did inches for. So I'm going to select these guys because now I have to tell that toolpath that that's what I'm carving. There is my depth of 0.55 inches. So like I said, we're gonna go 0.55 into the material and 0.55 into the wasteboard, which gives us a 1.1 inch pocket to work with. My dowels are just a little bit less than that because, well, yes, you know, I'm gonna screw it down, so I'm not worried about vertical movement. It's the horizontal that I don't want there to be any play in. So that's what I did for there. I'm not gonna lie. The other reason I did it with a little bit more depth is because I'm lazy and I didn't want to do a tool change. I used a 1/4 inch ball nose for the roughing pass, which we're gonna do next. And I couldn't be bothered to do the 3 holes with an end mill. So I just did them with the ball nose. I might get in trouble for that because I'm lazy. That's part of the reason. So that's why I have a 1/4 inch ball nose in here, because I'm gonna use it for the dowel holes, the index holes, as well as the rough carve on the body, on the front. So the good news is it's gonna work out just fine, and I can prove that. We're gonna use the inside of these because we want to go inside. We do not need any tabs for this. We're gonna add ramps. 1/2 inch distance is usually pretty good. And my naming convention may not work for you, so you do what works for you. I tend to like to label my paths in the order I want to run them in, just so that you're not bouncing around. Because you can name it something fantastic, but if it's in the wrong order and you run the wrong thing at the wrong time, that's gonna spoil your day. Again, I've gone through the process a few times, so I felt like having them load up and, you know, show in Windows or Mac or wherever you're in your file structure in the order they're supposed to run. So there's my naming structure, you know, 0, 1A, that's my first one. There's the index holes, and then I put a great big warning right down here, into material, because it's gonna go into my material, not my surface or anything else. So I'm just giving myself a visual reminder. Wonderful, simple, calculate. It's gonna show up that there are my index holes. Everybody's happy. Nobody's happier than me. Next one. And again, we're gonna have to use our imaginations here a little bit, is going to be the roughing pass for the front of the body. Again, 1/4 inch ball nose. Oh, I didn't show my settings for that last one. Pretty unimportant because they're the exact same as I used for the roughing, so we're good. Whatever I use for the roughing, you're gonna have to go back and add it later. It's 3 holes, you'll survive. So again, my naming convention, I wanted it to run second, so that's why I got the B. It's the front roughing, and then you are going to select your 3D model. There it is. And you are going to do, sorry, not profile, sweet mercy. You're going to go to the 3D roughing toolpath, this little circular pyramid looking guy. You're gonna click on it, and it's going to bring up this fun looking menu. A little different than what you're used to because it's a 3D roughing one, not a 2D toolpath. So maybe a little bit of learning here. I will open up my settings for this guy. I found, and again, I may change these later, and I'll put the feeds and speeds in the description because I haven't done a hardwood version yet. Everything I've done has been pine. So I may find that I tweak these after. For now, I'm gonna roll with it because I know that when I bring it into G-Sender, if it's going too slow, I can speed it. If it's going too fast, I can slow it. These are fairly conservative numbers. Again, I don't run my machine like crazy, so I think it's gonna be okay. You'll notice that the step over is pretty wide because at this point, the roughing pass is just going to take off mass chunks of material so that when you go in with your finishing pass, it has less material to go through and it can kind of just, you know, fine tune and shave what it needs to shave. So I'm not worried about having a really tight step over, like where the bit moves over. I'm okay with it being pretty wide because the finish pass is gonna go and clean it all up for me. So those are my settings. Again, I'll throw them in the description. We're gonna hit okay. So if you recall a little bit earlier, I was talking about the limit planes and setting them at the depths that we want them to be. So you can see that we have it squished down. We're telling it to go down further so that it'll carve out all of our pockets to the depth we want. But again, the problem I was just explaining was that it then starts to carve all the sides of the guitar, which is not efficient the way it does it. It does this henpeck. It leaves a lot of tooling marks. And I said, that's hideous. I'm going to find a better way of doing it. Here's my it's a workaround, because at the end of the day, I couldn't figure out how to force the machine with the 3D model to just carve a nice profile toolpath with the 3D model. So here's the kind of cheatsy workaround. We are going to, that's why I had that selected, because, yeah. So here we are, back with our body selected, with our roughing toolpaths. And I found that with these particular settings, so the boundary offset is basically going to take the bit that you're running, and it will take it that much past the edge of your 3D model that you are carving. Really good, clears it out extra. The machining allowance is how much extra material it leaves on there in this roughing pass, so that your finished pass will then go and clean it up for you. It's like a buffer. The problem is, if you set this boundary offset too far, it's going to allow the bit to go all the way down and carve the whole side of the guitar again, like the limit plane. I don't like that. So I found by tinkering with my settings that I could get it, and I'm gonna show you in just a second because I wanna go through my settings of everything else. So we gotta make sure that the machine limit boundary that is selected is a selected level, which is our model. That's gonna tell what we wanna carve out, because if we have, let's say, the limit plane carved, it's going to do that entire big rectangle. It's going to carve the whole thing out. It's going to carve out all these spaces. It's a waste of time. So we just want to focus on just the model. The boundary offset, again, is where your bit will go past. Your machining allowance is the buffer it leaves. Roughing strategy, Z level seems to be the most efficient, but probably the least detailed. The 3D raster is going to be more detailed, but horribly inefficient as far as time goes. I think it went up by like an hour. And the difference, probably, I mean, if I'm being honest, I never did a 3D raster because the time savings was just too great to even bother with it. So that's what I used, Z level, profile last, order depth first. I didn't change the angle. I did ramp my plunge moves like I always do. And then again, I gave it my naming convention, so this one ran second. So I'm gonna hit calculate, and I'm gonna show you, haha. So this is going back to, I'm trying to not make it confusing, but I feel like I'm making it terrible. If you have this boundary offset number too great, your bit will be able to go past the thickness of the bit, and it will carve out the side of the machine, and it'll do the stupid henpeck again, leaving you with ugly toolpath marks on the side. However, if you have your preview open, and you use, or you tinker with those settings, because your settings might be a little bit different than mine, depending on what your, the shape of your body or the bit size you're using. But just trust me, if you tinker with that setting and you go in your preview, you'll see what I'm talking about, where if I preview the selected path, with the limit plane, let me do this. With that limit plane, we told it to go down, so it'll carve out all of these pockets to the full depth. Aces, we need that. But by doing that, it also went all the way down here. Not aces. Ugly tool marks. By changing that boundary offset, I'm not letting it go all the way, and you can see that it only just catches the edge of the guitar, and the edge of the guitar isn't a square. It's got a nice round over on it, and I wanted the 3D model to do that. I'm well aware I could have done it with a hand router, but I didn't want to. I wanted to show off what this guy could do. So by setting that boundary offset and tinkering with the number, again, it took me a few times to figure it out with the preview, it goes down just enough to get around this round over, and then it stops right where it starts to go straight, which is wonderful because we're gonna come in on the backside and carve out a nice toolpath that'll clean the whole thing up. We'll have a beautiful smooth surface to a round over to a nice smooth side, and it's gonna look awesome. You may need to ask a question because that might have been super unclear, but I'm hoping it's not. The only hiccup I found was there were a few spots that it still tried to do this goofy henpeck thing. Right there shows one little spot where it did go down a little bit deeper, but again, that toolpath we're gonna do on the backside to do the profile, we'll clean this all up. We should be good to go. That is our roughing toolpath. Yay. Next, we are gonna go on to our finishing toolpath. So we're gonna have roughing, and it's gonna leave, you know, not gouges, but it's gonna leave tool marks in the surface. It's not gonna look particularly pretty, but it's gonna get rid of the bulk of the material for us. Our finishing tool path is going to be this round, smooth looking sphere guy. So you'll select your model. You'll click on the 3D finish toolpath. And again, I already have mine there. I have my name so that it runs third in line because that's what I want it to do. So you guys would click on the 3D toolpath and it would bring this guy up. For this guy, I used an 1/8 inch ball nose. A word of caution, big word of caution. If your material is any more than about 1.79-ish inches, I will find the metric for that shortly, you may end up with your collet rubbing on the surface of your material. Unless you have some longer 1/8 inch bits, then you don't have anything to worry about. I wanted to do this where I was using the tools that most people would have out there, not a specialty bit. Again, an extended 1/8 inch ball nose is not really a specialty tool. You can use it for lots of other things, not just a guitar body, but for sake of argument, I tried to do it with, you know, a standard 1/8 inch ball nose. I got through. This version that I have sitting here was, again, I think it was 1.79 inches or something like that, and it just snuck by. There was a little bit of burning, but it machined out. A Telecaster body is typically 1.75 inches, which means we should be safe with the standard 1/8 inch ball nose. So that's what we used for this. My feeds and speeds were different on this one. I think I went a little bit slower. The biggest thing you'll notice is that my step over has drastically reduced in number, I think is what I'm going for. It went from 50% to 8. So 50% meaning with the roughing pass, where it would take 50% of the width of the bit and move over. Now it's only going to take 8% and move over. It means you're going to get a much cleaner, much finer finished surface. I believe through experience that between 8 and 12 is 6 and 12, 8 and 12, 8 and 10, somewhere in there is generally what you want to be using for a fine carve like this. If you want to experiment and go bigger, it will save time. That's your trade-off. The smaller the step over, the more time it will take to carve unless you speed it right up. The bigger the step over, the less time it will take, but you'll get a rougher surface. So that's about the only thing that changed here. I had it a little bit slower. It's been 10 days since I carved that last body. I feel like I may have sped this up in G Sender when I was running it, but for now I'm gonna leave it pretty conservative because again, we're running hardwood this time, not pine. So that's that. So for our machining limit boundary, we are going to go to selected level, which is the model level again. Our boundary offset, this is the same as the roughing pass. I would love to think that if you just use my 0.04 inches that it would work for you if you're using an 1/8 inch bit. And I'd like to say common sense, but let's not say common sense. I'd like to think that it would work out that it does the same thing where it does a nice smooth surface, does that round over, and then stops just below the round over so that we can cut it out afterwards. I don't know for sure that it will. So my advice is to tinker with that setting because it will allow you to get, again, that full round over all the way to the end of the curve and kind of to the start of the straight. Because one of them that I did, I set the limit plane and the machine or the offset boundaries a little bit, and I ended up doing kind of this. So I lost part of my round over and I was gonna have to sand it out by hand. And if I'm being totally honest, that completely defeats the purpose of using the 3D model, if that, you know what I mean? So make sure you have your limit plane set to go all the way. Make sure that you have your boundary offset set so that it will go all the way around that round over into kind of the straight by just a little bit, and then we'll cut it out after. You'll see in the preview what I'm talking about for that too. Same thing, I didn't really mess with these guys. I figured conventional made a certain amount of sense because it's, you know, we're doing loop-de-loops on the offset. I didn't change the step over retract because it didn't seem like there was a reason to. And again, my naming convention was to put this third in line because I wanted the holes, the rough cut, and then the finish. We're going to calculate this. It's gonna take a little bit longer because again, that 8% step over versus the 50%, you can see how much more blue there is here versus that roughing pass. And so I'm gonna deselect this to get rid of all that for us. And then I'm gonna hit preview selected path. So what you can see right now is the roughing toolpath, and you can see how it just kind of got over that round over and did its job. This will do the same thing, only the round over will be nice and refined. It will look wonderful. So I have my finishing toolpath. I'm going to preview my selected, and you'll see it goes wing, 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 wing. And look at that. Really sweet, nice round over. Again, it kind of carved out a little bit extra, which is wonderful. And again, some of these pocket holes are still going to, or sorry, the pickup holes and the selector holes might still have some of that henpeck. If you care that much, then I may have to make another tutorial, or you may have to figure out how to make some Vector Toolpaths to go around there. It's really not that hard. We can export from Onshape. Maybe I will make a tutorial where we do everything from vectors. You let me know if you want to see that in the comments. The last two things that we're going to do, and this is, am I going to do these or am I not going to do these? I think I deleted them. I don't think I used them. I think I forgot to delete my toolpaths here. Because originally, yeah, I think that's what it is. You guys are unfortunately working through this process with me, and that's part of the fun of working with me. Let's pull this guy back up. You can see that there are these little dimples, 1, 2, and 3. Those are the screw holes for my bridge. And then the 6 holes below it are I should Google what it is, but I call it the through holes for the strings to come from the backside of the guitar over the bridge. Again, my hybrid method is awesome and showing off what the machine can do and giving us a nice smooth round over, but you can see right from this preview that those holes are not perfect circles. Another call out to a band, yes! Those are not perfect circles. They're a little bit wonky, which to me, actually, if I'm being honest, kind of blows my mind because Onshape is like dead nuts accurate. VCarve should be able to import it. So my assumption is somewhere in that import process from Onshape to VCarve that it just doesn't bring it in down to that decimal perfection that I would love to see. Having said that, I think for one version, I don't have it in my notes, which I'm kind of annoyed for. Again, unfortunately, having things in my file is helping me. It's also hindering me at this point because I'm really second guessing whether or not I carved those because yeah, I did carve them, but I think I realized that they're somewhat useless, I think is what happened. And you can't really see them on the 3D model that you import. So I'm gonna run with, I forgot to delete these toolpaths. At the end of the day, I had created vector circles and carved these out. And I think through going through my process, I'll read through my notes after that, I realized carving anything for the bridge screw, they're marker holes, and for the through holes for the strings was kind of useless because at the end of the day, when we flip the guitar, we're gonna carve those holes right from the back all the way through. And the bridge 3 little dimples that we're seeing right here on the screen, these guys, sorry, this guy, that guy, and that guy, the ones for the screws for the bridge pickup, they were more or less useless because yes, great, they give me something to line up to, but at the end of the day, I care far more about where the strings are coming through, and then I can just kind of mark those manually and drill them out. I'm gonna really hope that's what I was planning on doing. And worst case scenario, I mean, that's what I'm gonna end up doing, because if we flip it over and we carve all this other stuff out, I can't flip it back over and do it again. So let's roll with that. I'm gonna pretend that these didn't exist, and the version of the model that you guys get to play with probably won't even have them in there, or I'll have them turned off. You wanna turn them back on, you wanna carve them, you knock yourselves out, but I don't think we need to do them, so I'm just gonna ignore them for now. I am going to hit close, and you are going to see that the front side of the guitar is set up. The only thing else we need to do, again, I'm gonna leave them in there because something tells me I shouldn't delete them, but is we're gonna save our toolpaths. So we're gonna go through. I tend to save my toolpaths out individually. I know that I could throw the index holes and the roughing together because of the same size bit, but I just don't want to do that. I like compartmentalizing so that if something does go wrong, I'm not scrambling and trying to cancel the job. The job comes to a finish and I can go on. So we're gonna select our index hole, we're gonna click on Save Toolpath, visible toolpaths to one file, which is just one, which is wonderful. We have our post processor set up as inch and G-code, and we're gonna hit Save Toolpath. It's in my body for G-code folder. I just delete the main because that's just the name of the sheet that it's on and we don't need that. But it will, as I save these out, the order will be in the order I want them to run in. So 1A, the index holes. Boom, saved. Deselect, and then we'll select our front roughing. We will save the toolpath, and you'll see there's our first one. I will, again, you could leave the main in there if you really want to. It's just the name, again, the name of the sheet that it's on. I don't need it, so I'm gonna get rid of it. We'll save that one, and then we're gonna save the last, but certainly not least, the finishing one. And you'll see, so when you open up your G-code files, you'll have your 1A, which is your index holes, your 1B, which is your roughing, and your 1C, which is your front finishing. You'll save it, you'll hit close. I feel fairly confidently that I did not hit save once during this entire process, which is absolutely hilarious to me because usually I lose work when that happens. I'm incrementing my files just so I have backups because I'm a little paranoid. And that's about it for the front side of our guitar. The cool part about the next part of the video is we're gonna do the backside, and a lot of the steps are fairly repetitive. We're gonna, add a toolpath to those index holes. We're going to do a roughing and a finishing pass. The only addition that's gonna happen back there is that I am going to actually do the ferrule holes for the strings coming through. And I think that's about it. And I did those, that's not it. And we got to do that profile outline path. There's a little bit of funkiness there. I probably should have told you guys that I cheated initially and I made the body a little bit bigger so that I can cut it back later. Maybe Louis will be really kind and let me record that later. But for the time being, we're going to do the backside next. I'm going to go get a drink because I'm parched from talking too much, and I will see you shortly. Stick around. So here we are, we're back from my little drinky break, and we are going to flip over to doing all of the work for the backside of this carve. So we're gonna toggle the bottom and top side. You will see that, like we did yesterday, we moved the index holes to the backside. They're already there. The tabs are already here, but we'll have to set up the height on those to make sure that we're happy with them. I don't know that I do. I think we're pretty good. Yeah, that's below that round over, so I think we're good. Yep. The other things we're going to have to accomplish today, and this is where my hybrid theory kind of gets a little heavier than yesterday, is, like I said, the 3D model's great. It does a decent job, but because we're only going to carve down just past that round over, we're going to create a profile toolpath to go all the way around the guitar. It gives us a nice clean edge all the way around, and it's a lot faster than that goofy henpeck that the software seems to want to do. Having said that, and the disclaimer on this one is, I maybe should have said this yesterday, or maybe even in Onshape, the first video we did, because we are going to create that vector outline profile pass, I found when I was doing the experiments that you have to offset it in a little bit, which means that your guitar, and on the guitar it's not such a big deal, but on the neck it ends up being a bigger deal because it has to fit that neck pocket perfectly. In Onshape, maybe I did explain it. I'm gonna have to go back and look, I don't remember. I offset, or I thickened is what it's called in Onshape. I thickened the whole body of the guitar by 0.02 inches. And the reason I did that was so that when I do this profile toolpath, I inset it by 0.02 inches. So I end up with the actual shape of the guitar, but I kind of had to cheat it. It is absolutely a workaround, but it gives me the right shape and the right size, and it gives me a nice clean edge. So that's what we're gonna start to work on now. The roughing and the finishing stuff is the same as the front side. We'll run through that really quick. And then, like I said yesterday with my naming convention, the indexing side of things, yesterday we created the file that is going to put holes in the material. Now we are going to put the holes that are going to go into the wasteboard. So we will select, I was thinking there that I was going to say we're not going to select these because I already have the path, but we're going to select those three. You guys will go to create profile toolpath. I'm going to double click on this and it's going to bring mine up. And then I'm going to select them again because my toolpath was missing those because I deleted them, but we're back on board. So you have your three things selected. You have your profile toolpath up. in order to, I mean, at the end of the day, you don't have to tell it a starting depth. You could start from 0 and it'll just kind of fake carve all the way down, but then you have to include that in your cut depth. What I did was I hovered over the guitar like I showed you yesterday, and I can see that I am 0.0472 down to the surface of the guitar. So I need to know the depth of my material. What was the depth of my material? Oh man, I gotta go to my sheet. There we go. 1.752. So I'm just, oh, stop. 1.752 is the thickness of my material. So I'm going to tell it 1.752 is my start depth. So that's, instead of starting at the top of the material, I'm telling it start 1.752, which will be at the basically the bottom of the material or the top of the wasteboard. And I'm going to tell you to go down 0.55 inches. So the same depth, it's going into the wasteboard that it went into the material. That's all that is. Again, because I'm lazy and don't want to do more bit changes, you should probably use an end mill for this, but I'm using the ball nose because I'm lazy and don't want to change twice. My feeds and speeds are pretty basic. Because it's kind of a drilling operation, I slowed it down a little bit so it doesn't burn out my bit. I guess I could have gone over that yesterday, but I didn't, and you probably would have figured it out. Inside, no tabs, ramps, and again, so just like I did yesterday, where I gave myself a disclaimer of into the material, this disclaimer is into the wasteboard, so that when I load up my files in order, it says right in there, into wasteboard, and I go, oh yeah. So we're gonna calculate that. It's gonna tell me that my material thickness is this, but my tool depth is this, and it is going to cut through and possibly damage your machine bed, which we're doing on purpose, which, you know, there's a lot of holes in my surface board, but it is what it is. We'll replace those boards at some point. That is our holes into our wasteboard. Our roughing pass is going to be just like we did yesterday. We'll select, uh-oh. Get out of here. Close. What's going on? Why will you not let me just, oh, because I'm sorry. I'm in my sheets and I'm doing stuff here. It's because I have this open. As soon as you have this guy open and you leave it open, it basically cancels everything out and won't let you touch anything. So if you ever mess with that, that's why it won't let you go back. I'm clicking like a madman. Okay, so there's our wasteboard. Great, we've calculated, we're happy. That's gonna be quick. The roughing one, we're gonna grab our model. And again, you're gonna go to the 3D roughing toolpath right here. And when you have your model selected and you click on that, you will get something that looks like this. Again, 1/4 inch ball nose. My settings are all the same as the roughing pass for the front side. So again, will throw those in the description. Our selected level will be the model again, so that it carves out the model stuff and not the entire material surface, because that's a waste of time. Our boundary offset, this is what I was talking about yesterday with the front side, is I had to tinker with these the boundary offset number, and that's gonna allow me to get it to do the top for me and around that around the round over, and then just a little bit down, and then we'll use the profile toolpath to cut it all out, and it will be lovely. And our Z level roughing strategy, our profile and our depth first, our ramp plunge moves. And again, my naming convention puts it second. That's what the B is for. So we'll hit calculate. I'm kind of buzzing through this because we did it on the front side. So I'm hoping that if you do need to revisit it, you can just rewind the video. So let's actually preview this so you guys can see what we're gonna get for this. So we're gonna preview just that roughing one. And again, you can see it went down a little bit further, but that's going to change once. Why is that doing that? Uh-oh, hold on, let me check my notes, folks. This is what you guys may end up having to do. If I'm being totally honest, I don't know that my numbers will work straight up for you. So if you notice when you do the preview that it's going down really far, this is the number that you're gonna tinker with. So we're gonna hit calculate on that. We're gonna select this, we're gonna hit calculate. And then we're going to reset the preview to make sure we're getting actually what we're supposed to get. And then we're gonna hit preview. And now it's missing a whole bunch of stuff. So what did I have in there, 0.15? Oh, let's make it 1.135. Uh-oh, I don't remember what my number was. It was 0.15. Anyway, we're gonna tinker with this until we get the right kind of look, which is, you're starting to see that it's getting a little henpecky. That's what all these big deep ones are, which a couple of them I don't mind, but I don't want it to do that all the way around. So what changed that it was doing that? Huh. I'm feeling rather perturbed. I thought I had this figured out. Apparently not. Oh, you know what we forgot to do? I know why. I know why. Wow, my note-taking ability is not as good as I thought it was. we didn't play with the limit planes. That's why. So I'm going to delete this tabs because we don't need that one. I already have it down here. The limit plane is the reason. So we're going to get out of our preview and we're going to deselect this guy. That is the issue. Ha ha ha. Because, so if you remember on the front side, we had all those pickup pockets to get all the way down. We don't have those on the back the same way. Part of the reason we don't have those on the same way is we're going to use vectors to cut out the ferrule holes down here. And we're going to use vectors to clean up the neck pocket, because what comes in with the 3D model, again, is one of those ones where it just didn't carve clean enough for me. So I hybrided it up and I used vectors. So that's why that was coming up funky. I apologize. I've been sitting here too long. So we are going to mess with the limit plane on this guy, and it's way up there. Why is it that high? What is going on? Oh, that's the body. Wow. Louis, I need a coffee, bud. So we are actually going to bump this one up, and you'll see that I'm going to take it. How did I miss that in my notes? Oh, I put front and back. Oh, Scott. What a letdown. I'm going to take this limit plane until it just gets to where that round over is. You'll see right here that the round over is flat, comes around, and then starts to go vertical here. We're going to take it kind of close to that because we just want it to get a little bit past there. That's pretty close, I'd say. I think I would just do a check all the way around to make sure that we're good. I mean, we should be. That's what the issue was. So I apologize. We may have to splice some back and forth there. Now, when we go into our roughing, so sorry, we're going to bump up the base height of the limit plane so it gets just to the end of the round over. Oh, I know what I did. Wow, this is like ADD central right now, guys. So we'll select our body. We'll go back to our roughing bit, and you are going to see that this number should now work. Yes, it's not going to carve all the way through the body with these ones, but quite honestly, I don't want to use the 3D model just for that anyways. If I'm being totally honest, I probably should have got rid of them entirely, but I think I left them in there as a reference point more than anything. So we are going to calculate this now, and now you're going to see when I preview this guy, it just carves down a little wee bit. That's what I was looking for. Well, I'm glad I noticed that I did it wrong anyways. I can tell you like 150 ways how not to carve a guitar. I don't know if I can tell you one way to do it though. So here we are, roughing pass. That's all it's basically going to do. That's okay by me. The next one we're going to do is our finishing pass. So we still have our body selected. We're going to go into our finish. Again, we're using an 1/8 inch ball nose on that. I'll show you my settings, even though you'll find them down below. Same thing. I can't remember if I sped this up or slowed it down, or if I just left it as it was, but our 8% step over so that we get a really nice, fine, clean finish. It's going to just barely move over. We are going to put our selected level as model. Our boundary offset is 0.045, which should work nicely for getting us just around the edge there. Our offset is conventional, or sorry, our strategy is offset and conventional. And again, my naming convention puts this third in line, and I will hit calculate. It's going to take a little while because again, that 8% step over, and it's got a lot to take in with this one. There we go. So I'll turn that path off so you can see it. So there's our roughing, right? Wink. That's what our roughing one is going to look like. And then when we do our finish, this is what we're going to get. It's going to do a bunch of weird, funky swirls, and ta-da! We end up with a really sweet guitar. So that's the index holes, roughing, and finishing. I tried to whip through that because quite honestly, the somewhat more tricky part of the backside is the vectors that I had to create to work around this dumb henpeck and some of this 3D model stuff that just wasn't awesome. So now that I'm going through it for you, I really feel like I'm going to do a vector tutorial right from start to finish, but for the time being, let's focus on this guy. So 2D view. Select your body, and we're going to go into this fancy little guy here, the create vector boundary around selected components. Whew, it's a mouthful. When you click on it, you'll see that it gives us an automatic line that draws around our actual model. That is super handy because trying to draw that by hand would be a pain in the rump. And bringing in a vector from Onshape or Illustrator or whatever, you'd have to line it up manually. This pops it right in there for us. This is what we are going to use. This is the start of what we're going to use to cut out the guitar from our block of wood. Up until now, we've got it carved down to that round over, but there's still a big solid chunk in the middle. And instead of doing that goofy henpeck to cut it all out, I'm going to use a vector and it's going to go zzz a whole bunch of times and leave us with a nice clean edge. The problem with this is if we don't tell it not to cut where the tabs are, guess what it's going to do? Eventually it's going to cut all the way through and our guitar is going to start to shift and it's going to get buzzed and you're going to be really mad at me because I didn't tell you and you wasted a $150 piece of wood. My workaround on this was it was twofold. One, we're going to offset that path in by the 0.02 inches so that we get the actual size of the body. So that's what I was talking about with making it bigger in Onshape and then back to original size here. And two, we're going to define where these tabs are so that when it goes around the profile, it goes to the tab, stops, continues. It's going to be a couple different paths. But again, this is one of those ones where if I wasn't so paranoid, we could save all 4 of these out. So the top, the sides, and the bottom as one path, and it would just do them all for me. I might do that. We'll see how confident I'm feeling. When I did my tests, I did them as 4 separate paths or 4 different paths so that I could control them. So if something did go sideways, I had a chance in between to fix it. So we've got our vector profile, we've got our vector outline created from our model. In order to make sure we cut out these tabs, or we don't cut out the tabs, we're going to draw some more vectors in here. You can do it with just straight splines if you'd like to. I tend to like to use the rectangle tool because I can draw the rectangle the same kind of shape and size as the actual tab. So go in and just basically trace the same size. It doesn't matter if it goes out to the edge as much because we're going to get rid of that anyways, but you're going to want to trace that. And eventually we're going to come back in and we're going to snip out this part, and we're just going to be left with a line that comes down and goes over. So that will be our toolpath. So we'll go and do that for all 3. I'm going to do the ones that are perpendicular first, just because I like doing it that way. There's 2. There is the 3rd one, and then the 4th one is just rotated to match the original one. Again, this is not an exact science on these. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. It's just what we're using to make sure that the tabs don't get cut out so our guitar stays in place. So you can, what's the rotate one? There we go. So if you hit the rotate one, you can actually move the pivot point and you can move it wherever you want. I'm going to move it up to this corner. So all I did was draw my shape. I double clicked on it to move. And then if you want to change the pivot point of it, you can just use your rotate and your pivot point will be here. You'll see you'll be able to drag it wherever you want. And the reason I do that is so that I can just ding, do that. And then, I mean, again, am I perfect on this? No, so we'll just stretch this out a little wee bit and then we will rotate it so we get it as close as possible. Again, not cutting out the tab perfectly is not a big deal. We're just making sure we're not destroying it so that it actually keeps the guitar in place. So from there, we are going to trim this out. So we're going to grab our scissors right here, interactive trim, as it were. And I'm going to get rid of the middle of the guitar first, I think. Well, there's a lesson for you that I forgot about from the last time I did it. When it creates that outline from the model, it actually is going to create the circles, anything that cuts through. So it is grouped right now. So we are going to ungroup it right here, which is wonderful. And that's what that hot pink solid line was telling me. And now it's telling me that there's my dash line. I can actually do that. So back to where we were, we're going to grab our scissors. We're going to get rid of this chunk and we're going to get rid of this chunk. And I will not do this chunk because it will get rid of all of it, which is not what we want to do. So we'll go back in a second and fix that up. So we're just going to trim out the guitar, trim out the tab, trim out the guitar, trim out the tab, and wash, rinse, repeat. Cool. In order to get rid of this chunk, because if we leave that in there, it's going to carve out that and cut this out, which is not what we want. We are going to right click and going to node edit mode. Otherwise you can just hit N. And we are going to click on this spline, which is now one big spline. And we're going to right click on the span we want to get rid of and delete span right there. Bing. Now you'll see that when we go over here and we repeat the same step, we have one path that's going to do that cutout. Yay. We have one that's going to come down here and we're going to delete this one, which I have to click on it properly. Right click, delete span. Right click, delete span. Now we can exit the node edit mode and you'll see we have 1 all the way at the top, 2 on the side, 3 on the bottom, 4 on the other side. We have 4 paths That's what we're going to use to cut out the guitar. Yes, it's going to leave those tabs in place, which is exactly what we want, so it stays nice and solid. And yes, we are going to have to sand those down after. You're going to have to sand something at some point, so we may as well make sure this thing is locked in there while it's being carved. That's the way I feel about it. If you don't like it, then you may have to experiment on your own. So the next part of this, and this is where that offset, the offset in Onshape, and then the inset in V-Carve comes in. So when I did this, the body is probably a little less important to do this on, but on the neck, when you go to mate the neck into the neck pocket, if you carved in on the neck, which we'll do in another video, and that's why I'm doing it now, and you offset it inwards, and you shaved off that 0.02 inches, when you go to put it in the neck pocket, it's gonna rattle around in there. And now we're talking like a millimeter. We're not talking a lot. Okay, that's a really bad example, but like that looks like the Grand Canyon to me. That's a whole lot of space in there that we really don't wanna see. So that's why I'm trying to mate this up as tight as I can. Now, I will say after I carve out this body, I'm going to measure the spec of what I'm left with, and I may have to go and adjust the neck, or I may have to monkey with that because I really do want that to be as tight as possible. And personally, I would rather leave a little extra meat on that part and hand sand it down so that when it slides in there, it's nice and tight, versus relying solely on the machine and then saying, oh man, it's a rattly neck and I just wasted 40 bucks on a good piece of wood. We'll get to that. Again, that's probably, is that video 3? That's video 3. So we'll do the neck later, or this is where if you're going to buy your own neck because you don't want to build your own, make sure you have those specs really dialed in. Use a junky piece of wood to test and make sure that you do your body and then it's gonna, you have your neck measured. Sorry, I'm all over, guys. And that your specs on your body fit, because if you're buying your neck, you've already got it ready to go. You want to make sure when you slide it in there. So you may have to modify yours on the body where it's actually a little bit tighter and you have to hand sand or do something on it to slide it in there. Or you give her and just call it your home done guitar, and it's not going to be perfect, because if I'm being totally honest, that's kind of where I've relegated myself to. It's not going to be perfect. So what I did for this, and I'm gonna probably eat my words, is we're gonna grab all 4 of them and we're going to go to the offset button and we're gonna tell it inwards. Now, we may have to reverse some of the paths because depending on how it snips, sometimes it'll actually, inwards is outwards, it gets reversed, so we'll have to reverse it. So we're gonna offset it and see what happens. I want to do my distance of, like I said, 0.02 inches. Create sharp offset corners, so I don't want it to round stuff because that's not what I want it to do. And I'm not deleting the originals because I'm paranoid and I like to keep stuff. I'm gonna hit offset. Now, I'm gonna go and look immediately. You'll see that that one offset it in, that one offset it out. So this is what we're gonna have to go through, and we may have to delete a couple of these. That one went out and the bottom one went in. So we can leave the left and the bottom, the right offset in the incorrect direction. So I'm just gonna straight up delete it. And the top one did the incorrect direction, so I'm gonna just delete it. So we're gonna grab our toolpaths that need to be reversed, and you're going to go back into node edit mode right there. And you're gonna right click on it, and you are going to, sorry, not for the love of Pete, cooperate. You're gonna right click and you are going to say reverse direction right here. And you're gonna do that for this one as well, because that one was also the incorrect orientation, reverse direction. And now, when we exit out of that, by hitting escape, you can grab these two and you'll see that when we hit inwards, it will go inwards. Yay. Inwards and inwards. So going inwards into the tab, the 0.02 doesn't matter because that tab is wide enough. That's again why I made them pretty meaty. That is the funky offsetness. Now, again, you can choose to just let it carve around the top of this neck pocket, offset in. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that I actually left, and this is why I don't delete original stuff, I didn't like how close you can see there's not much meat all the way around that little part. It's pretty, we're talking like maybe 1.5 millimeters or so. It's pretty skinny. If you offset that by that 0.02 inches, that gets even skinnier. So what I'm gonna do is leave the original vector that it created, and I'm gonna delete the offset portion. It's a little confusing, it's a little messy workaround, but after I carved that out, I saw it and went, I'd rather hand sand that little part if I need to than chop it out and be stuck with what I'm stuck with. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to take the original path. We're going to delete some stuff by going into node edit mode. And I'm just going to delete this span here because I don't need it. And that one too, for that matter. Cooperate with me, delete span, which will leave me with this, which I can just drag down and then I'll connect them back up. I'm gonna do the same thing over up here. So I think I got rid of this guy and I just kind of smoothed it in. I think I might start with this one this time because again and again, this isn't a Fender or Gibson master built guitar. It's not worth $5,000. Like, if you're that much of a perfectionist, then that's cool. You take your time and you go through and you find maybe different workarounds or you perfect your process. For me, it's like the first, second, third guitar I've kind of roughed out and made. I'm okay with it having some flaws or some things that are a little bit quirky. It's not going to change how it sounds. It's not going to change how it looks. And quite honestly, if somebody walks up to your guitar and can see a 0.1 millimeter difference, then they should be working in one of those shops. So from here, we're going to just delete the rest of, I think if I exit out of here, I can. Yep. So I'm just going to delete that chunk because I don't need it. That's the original one. And this is probably, if I'm being honest, where I copied stuff over and left duplicates because I'm paranoid. I'm not going to do that this time because I'm a rebel. We're going to go back into the original toolpath that was created. We're going to go into our edit node mode. And the kind of cool part about this is you can just grab this and it will still keep the original. You'll see the original line and then where it's going to move to. I'm just going to drag it down far enough that it will intersect the offset line we just created. Again, we're talking like, what's like, can you say a 1/10 of a millimeter? We're talking like minuscule. Nobody's going to notice if that changes a little bit. And then the same thing for this one. So I'm just going to fudge this so it just intersects. And while yes, I am changing it just marginally, I'm not that worried about it. If I really don't like how that comes out, I'll hand sand a little bit extra off there and I'll be okay with that and I can live with myself. From here, we are going to use our interactive trim tool again, and we're just going to get rid of the inside chunk, and you'll see it leaves a little piece, and that's cool because we'll come in and say, see you later. And now we've gone the original path out here and the offset path in here. And we'll do the same thing back over here. You can see I already got rid of the inside part of that, and now we have that. And we're gonna hit close. And now we have our inset part there to cut out the nice profile. And we left a little bit of extra meat around there just to make sure everything's happy. And now we just have to add toolpaths to these paths. So that was hopefully clear. I know it's a funky workaround. Again, if somebody knows how or when or why that henpeck thing is happening and can save me all this headache, I want to hear about it because I couldn't figure it out and a couple of us looked at it and we couldn't figure it out. So let us know if you know. From here, you are going to, again, I've got 4 different tool paths, top, bottom, left, and right. I have them named as offset because they are offset and not original, which again, a lot of verbal text reminders for myself because I'm fairly forgetful. So we'll start with the top. You will select your top one. You're going to go into your profile toolpath. When you click on that, you are going to end up with something that looks like this. I'm just going to reselect mine. Your cut depth, you want to be the thickness of your wood, which I'm proving how forgetful I am because I've already forgotten what my thickness is. I'm going to go back to my sheet. 1.752 is my depth, so I'm going to change this to 1.752 will be the actual depth. I might go just a little bit more. 1.752. I'm going to go 1.755. We're talking like a third, or like a 3/1000th of an inch. We're not talking much, but just enough to make sure it punches all the way through. Oh, wait. I don't actually have to do that. I apologize. 1.752 it is, because that's the thickness of my material, but we've already, on the front side, which is facing down at this point, it will already have carved up and in a little bit. So this is going to go almost to the depth of the wood, which will not actually be there because there will be that little carved out part. So that's actually okay. I used a 1/4 inch ball nose for this because, again, we're not tight for space or anything else, and I didn't want to change my tool because I'm lazy. Unfortunately, you do have to do a couple tool changes on this one. So we'll go into my settings. Again, 8% step over doesn't actually matter because we're not stepping over at this one. We're just going straight down, but that doesn't matter. Feed rate was 80. I feel like I bumped this up while it was cutting it out. This is super conservative. I'm gonna leave it like this for now in the video. You may see in the description I changed it after. 10 days is a lifetime for me, so I don't remember. Either way, we're gonna go to the, ooh, I don't wanna go on the inside. Nope. We want the outside of this one. I think I didn't reverse them. I just changed which machine vector I used, which as long as you end up carving outside of that line, that's what you're looking for. If you carve inside, you're gonna carve out, you know, a quarter inch worth of bit and it's not gonna look as pretty, and that is a problem. We don't need ramps, or we don't need toolpaths. We do have my ramps on, and like I said, I have this fourth in line. That's what is the delineation of the D is. There's my offset, and I'm gonna hit calculate. It's going to tell me that it's going to cut through the material thickness. It's not. I know it's not. We're good to go. So I'm going to actually reset my preview. Let's see what it looks like when we just do this. So we're just going to show you the preview selected toolpath, and you'll see that it does a pretty sweet job. Why is that? Oh, this is why we always preview. That's not what it's supposed to look like. Look how ugly that would be if I did that. Let's go have a look. Oh, I didn't hit calculate. I didn't hit calculate. I did hit calculate. What am I doing? Let's reset this. I want to see what's going on here. Preview selected. Yeah, that doesn't look great to me. Well, the good news is we're going to go back into this toolpath. So let's double click on it in our 2D view, and it's going to, it should show us. Why is it not showing me my toolpath? Select. See, that's why. This is what I was talking about. So that is clearly showing me that it went on the inside. So my inside, my outside are backwards. This is why we always look. Detail oriented is really good. So we'll go back into our toolpath. We will actually tell it to go on the inside. We are going to recalculate. Everything else is going to stay the same, and it's going to tell me the same error, and I'm going to say that's cool. And then I'm going to, aha, yay, small victories. Now let's go into our preview, and you'll see that, let's just get these two back up. Preview, yay. So now we're back to this, and now it's gonna look super fancy when we do this. Ready? Yay! Cuts the outside. This is great, and you'll see right here, this is what I was talking about. I noticed this in my preview, and when I started carving, it was the same. That's a pretty skinny piece of wood to leave in there, which is why I did not want to go that extra 0.02 in. I felt it was safer to leave it and to hand sand it if I need to. I'm still a rookie and learning. So we're gonna go back into our other toolpaths. We are gonna make sure that we do them properly. We're gonna click on our, at the end of the day, we can probably get rid of these two, but I'm gonna leave them for now. We're gonna go to our bottom, which is our next one. I don't know why I did top, bottom, left, right. That's kind of weird. I usually work clockwise or something. Either way, let's go to our bottom one. You guys would select on your bottom one. You'd go to your profile toolpath again, and you would end up with the same thing we just ended up with. So 1.752 was our depth, which is cool. All the settings stay the same. I'm hesitant to put inside now because I don't know if it's going to do it right, but we're going to test it. And we're going to double, triple check again. You could save these all as one. I have them ordered to go 1, 2, 3, 4. We hit calculate, but I don't have a toolpath selected, so now we do. Calculate. It's not going to cut through. We already know it's good, and I feel like that is incorrect again. That looks like it's inside, doesn't it? So I'm going to go back and reverse that because I can already tell it's going to be wrong. So we're going to go outside. We're going to hit calculate. We're going to say okay, and then if we just go into our 2D view, yeah. You'll see it's going outside. It's doing what it's supposed to do. Just double check. Even after actually I did 3 of them on the one that turned out, I'm not gonna lie. There is, I caught it as I was watching it as it was carving, and it literally gave me, what, 2 inches where I messed it up. And I went, oh, I got the toolpath on the wrong side. But I saved it, and that was the only mistake I made on it, but at least I knew what it was. So I was okay with it. So we'll get out of that, and we're gonna just keep on going. The left one, we'll select our left one. You guys would go to profile. I'm gonna go here, and then I'm gonna reselect it. I hope everyone understands why that's happening, because I have these toolpaths already in there, but I don't have any toolpaths designated to them. So that's why it keeps on doing this for me. It won't do that for you guys. We're going to keep on going and changing, and we're going to say yes. And again, we're going to put that in our order. We're going to hit calculate, and we're going to cancel a second. I didn't change it. 1.752. We're going to hit calculate. It's going to tell us that's going through, and we're going to ignore it. And we're going to go back into our 2D view and see that I, for some reason, just cannot get this figured out. Calculate. Okay. And then just go straight back into our 2D view. We are on the outside of the line. Regardless of whether or not it's inside or outside over here, we look visually and it is on the outside. That's all we care about. And then we're going to finish off with the right one. Double click, clink. And then, I don't know, I'm guessing at this point. But we're going to get the right thing going. We're going to hit calculate. We're going to ignore that. And we're going to go back here. And it is, wow, I'm just guessing wrong all over. So if you go in and you see it visually is on the wrong side, just go and reverse what it is and it will do what it's supposed to do. Now we are going to, again, I don't really need to preview these, but I'm going to anyways. You can see that this is why we made those tab cutouts. It's going to cut in, come around, cut in, cut around, but it's going to leave our tab intact. It will, again, because of the final toolpath, you'll see the finishing toolpath, you'll see that it actually carves into it a little tiny bit. It doesn't matter. That's why, again, I made them so thick. I was working through the process a number of times and kind of learned the flaws, just so we can see what the left one will look like. There we go. And then the bottom one, there we go. It will carve it out nicely all the way through. It leaves with a really clean edge. There may be minimal sanding that you have to do around there because there might be a little bit of henpeck on some of those that goes through, but again, we're not spending 10 G's on a Gretsch. We're spending 200 on a homemaker, so I'm okay with it. The next part of all of this is for Scott to take a breath. And again, I haven't actually assembled a complete guitar as of yet. I've carved out a body, I've carved out the necks. I have fitted everything in there, but I haven't actually, like wired one up and strummed it. So there's still a chance that my neck and all of my bridge and stuff are not going to line up perfectly. And I may have to go in and like shim the neck later. These, again, this is why people pay so much for these fancy guitars. Somebody's already done this math. They've already worked out this stuff for you, so you don't have to. So for where I'm going with this is that 3D model is going to carve out some of these things for us, right? So like these neck holes, or the neck plate screw holes, they're gonna carve them. If you don't like them and you don't want to deal with it, you can go into Onshape and just get rid of them. Same for the ferrules. If you don't want the funky shapes, like I'm obviously gonna delete these because they're not even round. And I have round router bits doing the job, so I should be able to get a circle. I'm gonna delete these, I'm gonna create my own. And that's where we're going next. So, like I said, I'm just going to straight up delete these guys because they are so hideous and I'm not going to need them. And the same for the neck plate screw holes. So in order to make sure that I've placed the neck plate screw holes and the ferrule holes in the right spot, again, a bit of a workaround, but it worked pretty well for what I've seen so far. I went back into Onshape right here. And I ended up, so you can see that I have, where is my body edges fillet? That's where it rounds, gives that nice round over that we like. I'm going to suppress this. And by suppressing it, it's going to bring those sharp edges back, which is really handy because now I should be able to get out of here. I'm going to select this face and I'm going to select this face and I should be able to, nope. I don't want STL. Maybe it's just selecting one. I think that's what I did. I select one and there we go. So in order to get the outlines for this, vectors, so I can bring them into VCarve so I can line them up nicely, you suppress the fillet, you export as DXF, DWG. You can call it whatever you want. I think I called it something funky like Telecaster body, vector outlines, something like that. And I spelled it properly, right? It's a DXF, cool, set 0, that's all good. We're gonna hit export. Okay, it's gonna bring that up. I've already got this saved out somewhere else, so I'm just gonna pull it up from there. From there, I need to learn to pause between things. We're going to import our vectors that we just exported. And if I go into my DXF folder, it's not in body 4. It's still in body 3, it's okay. Either way, you're gonna have a DXF folder and you're gonna say, there's your tele body, and you're gonna say open. and it's going to tell you this, which we're going to ignore. And there is our body. Now, obviously it brings it in upside down. I'm going to group it just until I'm done doing some stuff. So it's grouped. I'm going to hold down, what is that? Alt, yep. And I'm going to rotate it around so that it is the correct orientation. And because I'm on this main sheet, if I hit F9 with that selected, it will center it. And you can see that it lines up pretty good with what the original vector was. Now, is it like bang on? No, but we're talking, this is like, again, a tiny amount of space. So if you want to funky around with it and move it around, you go ahead. I think I did originally, if I'm being honest. I nudged some things, but then I was just like, I'm not going to remember what I nudged it over by, so I didn't bother. Again, you can see it's not perfect, but the vector is probably a closer representation of that hard outline and profile than the 3D model. There is some amount of discrepancy when that 3D model comes in. So the reason I do this is now you can see that it has lined up my neck plate outline pretty close to where it's supposed to be in the model. Again, I can go in and I can nudge this after if I want to. And it also brought in my cutouts for my ferrules, which is wonderful because now I don't have to guess as much. I have those in this original one, but I think I'm just going to roll with this because the only thing I need is the ferrule holes and the neck after I get them lined up. So I'm just quite honestly going to see that they're off a little bit. So I nudged it over one to the left and one up and down. And that puts that pretty much bang on. Again, if I want to, we're talking like such a tiny amount of space here, and we're gonna go in and clean it up. So this looks like it lines up pretty good. I'm gonna leave it like this. I'm going to ungroup it. I'm going to delete the original one that came in. Oh, I forgot to join all the vectors. Well, the good news is I'm just gonna undo. Oh man, that was a royal screw up. Sorry guys. What I should have done after I grouped it was drag it over here, ungroup it. Sorry, that's a mistake on my end. Grab everything, hit the join open vectors. And the reason we're gonna do that, you'll see that there's a bunch of things that are closed that were open. And the reason why this is important is now we can select this once we get it in place and we can just delete this and everything else will be good. So I apologize, I missed that step. Louis is a good editor, he'll put it in the right order. So here we go. We grabbed it. It's been joined. I apologize. I should have known better. I do that every time. We're going to center it again. We're going to zoom in. We're going to nudge it over one. I think I'm going to leave it there. I don't think I'm going to nudge the vertical. Let's go look up here and see what it looks like. It's pretty close. There's a little bit of daylight, a little bit of daylight. I'm good with that. Now I will ungroup it. Now I will delete the original one because I don't need it. No, the original one, which is that little guy there. Again, you can see how like the margins are so small on this. We're not dealing with anything crazy. So that was how I lined up and made the initial tool paths for the neck plate cutouts and the ferrule holes. The ferrule holes were a little bit, they weren't tricky, quite honestly. It was just simple math, but there was a little bit of fine tuning on it because again, we're not talking like this thing's not down. I mean, it's very accurate, but there's still a certain amount of play in this, you know, all things considered. There was such a small amount of tinkering. I was okay with tinkering. Having said that, let's roll into getting these guys done. So this is my initial hole for the ferrules. I used these vectors that came in because they were nice round circles. Imagine that, not some funky egg looking something. And again, if you want to move these on their own, you're welcome to select them and just, you know, shift them up and down a little bit. That's pretty good for me. I mean, again, you're splitting hairs here. And when these come through the back of the back side of the guitar, the string holes in these, if these are off by just like a tiny bit, it's not going to affect anything because at the end of the day, it's going to flip over. It's going to come through these holes that come out and it's going to go over your bridge. So there's enough play there. You're okay with the thousandths we're talking. Like, you know, if we're off by an 1/8 of an inch, that's a problem. We're not off by an 1/8 of an inch. Initial ferrule holes I called, again, I threw them in the order that I want them to go. I used an 1/8 inch ball. No, I used an ML on these. I actually switched. I got smart because this was something that I have to punch through. So I switched over to an 1/8 inch end mill on these. I'm going to, what you would do is select them. You are going to create your profile toolpath. And when you click on it, it's going to probably bring up your previous settings. So we're gonna have to change some things. we're going to split our screen because this is where, remember I showed you guys how to find the heights of things? You know, if you go down to the bottom of that ferrule hole, you'll see that it drops and then boop, on the backside it goes up. So because my wood is a different thickness this time than it was last time, I'm gonna have to refigure some of these things, which kind of sucks because it's not a lot of fun, but it is what it is. We got to do it. So I'm gonna make sure that I have my original vectors here selected because that's what I want to be this main one. So my start depth is going to be, as I hover over here, you don't have to do this, but it's cumulative, right? So if you tell it 0.07 from 0, it's not going as deep as it needs to go. I need it to go, so sorry, I don't know, can we actually see this, Louis? Can you see what we're talking for this ferrule? It's pretty minuscule. We can kind of see that, you know, there's different depths to it basically. So when you get yours, they may look a little different than mine. Mine are kind of bullet shaped. And maybe I should draw a diagram and just throw it on the screen. But at the end of the day, there's like the top of it, it notches down to the main body and then it tapers in. So these are, I did 3 different levels. I did this main one, which is the first depth that I want to go down, which with my handy dandy digital calipers, I determined was, again, 1.6 millimeters. And again, I'm back and forth, and I was converting every time I did this. So, you know, whatever the depth, your main depth is, sorry, let's move my hand out of the way. Whatever your main depth is that first piece, right? That's the cut depth that I want to go down. So if I don't tell it where the start depth is, it's going to go down from there, and it's not going to go as deep as it needs to go. So you're kind of like adding up as you go, which is why finding these things out is important. And it's using a little bit of math. It's not rocket science though. So my start depth, I'm gonna have to change to this again, 0.0472. 0.0472. So there's my start depth. That will be the surface of my guitar. And then it's gonna go down, again, 0.07 inches or 1.7 millimeters. Boom. That's gonna cut out that little lip, which is great. And again, if we need to tinker with it, this thing's locked in. And if you're like, hey, that's not quite deep enough, you can actually even put it in. Here's a little tip. If you got this little lip on yours, like I have on mine, let me know when you can see that. Yeah? If you have a little lip, instead of trying to fit it in the hole the way it's supposed to go in, you can flip it upside down and you can kind of push it into this first hole that we're cutting. And if it's still sticking up by just a little tiny bit on that lip, then you know you need to go a little bit deeper and you can change your depth and you go down. That's what I did. I'm not saying it's the right way. I'm not saying it's the best way, but it's what worked for me. So we're gonna go inside on these guys. You'll see that it's carving out that. That's lovely. We're not gonna add, we are gonna add ramps. That's all we're gonna do. We're going to hit calculate. Yay. So you'll see that when we preview the selected one that now those are nice and sharp. Now we're talking like the 3D model actually will already have carved these out a little bit, but this is going to really like dial it in so that they are the right size. Sorry, microphone slipping. How did it come off my shoulder? That's impressive. I'm not even moving. That's just gonna kind of shave the inside of there. It's just gonna fine tune it. That's what we want. From there, I have the ferrule middle, I called it. So it's the middle section of this. We've got the top part, which is a little tiny lip. Then we have the middle, and then I ended up with the inside, which is kind of the hole that it has to drill all the way through. So for the middle, we'll double click on it. You guys, oh, haha, I deleted them because I'm silly. Bugger. Well, this is why, see, this is why I have reminders, because I knew I was gonna forget. So for the middle section, I grabbed my handy dandy calipers again, and I measured the middle section. Can you actually see what we're showing here? Yeah, so I measured that middle section and the diameter of that, and it is 6.5 millimeters, which, if I'm not mistaken, I then, this is the easy part. So we're gonna draw a circle, and we're gonna see that it was, what I say, 6.5. So we're gonna put, oh, not inches. Uh-oh, that's millimeters. I'm glad I checked. See, all these little reminders. Yeah, it's a 1/4 inch. There we go. So I'm gonna make it a 1/4 inch because I'm working imperial this time. And I'm just gonna click right somewhere in here. It doesn't matter if it's perfect, and then we're gonna close out. So the good part about that is we can now grab the one we've just created, which is the diameter of the middle. We grab the one that was already there, and we can go to the align right here. and then we can center the align to selection and it'll go boop right in the middle. And now we have what we need. Again, that cumulative effect, it's gonna start at the surface, it's gonna go down 0.07. Now we're gonna tell it to start, again, this is where I maybe should draw a diagram. Maybe I'll do that after. We're gonna basically start kind of compounding things on things. So it went down 0.07. We're gonna find where that is just by adding, right? Our surface plus 0.07 is gonna be our new starting point. And then we're gonna tell it to go down 0.37 inches, which is how long that middle part of the ferrule is. So from the bottom side of the lip to where it starts to taper is 0.37. This is, again, I'm gonna draw a diagram. It's gonna make life easier. But at the end of the day, we're basically just finding the starting point, going down, adding up those numbers to a new starting point, going down, and then we're gonna do it one more time. So the starting point is not 0.096 inches this time because my number changed. So I am going to close out of this one and I'm gonna go back to this one and I'm gonna say 0.0472. I am going to try to not make mistakes. So 0.0472 is my start depth plus the 0.07 plus 0.07. That is my new starting depth. That is the bottom of that lip. So that is my new starting point. So I'm gonna copy that, copy, and then I'm going to go into that middle one. And it's not this number, it is now this number. So that is my new start depth. So it's gonna go down to the bottom where it's already carved out, and then it's gonna go down 0.37. Great. So now I need to add these numbers to get my next one. It's a little convoluted, but I like being specific so I know what's happening and I'm not kind of going, oh, I don't know what happened, because then you're guessing the whole time. So we're gonna calculate that. No vector selected, that's a problem. And I'm jumping around a little bit and making mistakes because I'm talking while I'm working. That's never a good thing. The good news is we can just double click on these guys. We will Alt, Control, drag. Ooh, yeah, we're gonna do it this way. You can use the pattern tool if you want to. It takes just as much time just to grab them and drag them and copy them, right? It's only 6 copies. If this was like 10 or 20 or something, I'd probably use the pattern, but I'm not going to. So you just grab your inside one, or sorry, your middle one, I guess it is. Your outside one, go to your align, go to the middle. Yay. And just wash, rinse, repeat. So stop, cooperate. This one. Sweet mercy, it's not cooperating. It's just like my morning. Here we go. Same thing, we're just gonna keep on going. We're gonna grab the middle one technically right now. We're gonna align them. And if you get really, oh, actually, did I just find out something I can do? Oh, I did. I don't have to close every time. I don't know why I was doing that. Look at that. I just six-tupled my productivity. There we go. Those are all in place now. Now I have to tell that guy. So you would create your vectors like we just did. You would go to your profile guy. It would bring up this. You would tell it, oh, I lost my starting. That's okay. Oh, well, it's a good thing I left the calculator open, isn't it? Because I wasn't even paying attention to what the number was. 0.1172. So there's my start depth, 0.1172. I know that the 0.37 is the correct depth because that's what I did last time. These went pretty slow, just because one, we're doing a bit of, it's not really a drilling operation, but again, it's such a fine detail, fine-tuned thing that I didn't really want to have them whipping through there and just busting stuff up, especially when I'm getting into hardwood. It can take its time. I'm good with that. So these are super, super conservative, but if you want to speed them up, you can do it in G-Sender, or if you're more comfortable, then you just rip through and you can change these numbers. We do want to go inside. I do have to reselect them because I knew this was going to be an interesting tutorial. Here we go. We have ramps. I have it in the order that I want. I have it as the middle. I have it listed as my 1/8 inch end mill again. We're gonna hit calculate, and if we preview it, you're probably not even gonna see much of a difference, but I'll try and angle it over there. I'm gonna get rid of this so you can actually see what happens. Right, so that's what the 3D model left us with, and if we preview it, you'll see that it went and just, you can barely see it, but it cleaned up some more. So now there's like a little lip, there's a little ridge there where this ferrule will start to sit in. We're gonna do the exact same thing again for the inside, which is we're gonna grab one of these guys. We're gonna copy and paste it. Now, when you copy and paste, it's gonna paste it right in place. It's not gonna put it somewhere else. So you immediately go over to your draw circle and you'll see that it left it as a 1/4 inch, which is wonderful. Unfortunately, I don't remember what it was. So let's just measure. So I'm gonna measure the very, very bottom of this. Oop. Now it's gone forever. There it is. Uh-oh, no, it's gone forever. It's stuck. I'm just gonna grab another one. I know where it is, I'll grab it later. It's wedged between the desk. It's gone forever for now. It's okay. We're gonna do this. We're just gonna measure it up. It's pretty close to similar, but again, there is a taper on it, so I'm trying to account for that. So I got 0.21 inches. So it's such a minor difference between them. You know what I think I did do? Pause game. Oh yeah, I made that smaller. Let's put 0.21. Let's hit apply and you'll see it shrinks up. That doesn't seem like it's the right size to me. Oh, well look at that. I was thinking out loud. I didn't even bother with that taper. I didn't care. Let me show you what I did here. Hold on. Oh, how do I do this? I'm gonna hold this up. Here we go. So I don't know if you can see, there's this little tiny lip right here. Sorry, from the bottom of this lip to where my finger touches the bottom, that's the 0.37. I didn't even bother with the taper. So this next hole needs to be the thickness of, what did I have that as? That's the hole that I'm drilling through. Oh, you know where I found that? I'll be back. That's what I did. So you can see these 6 holes along the bottom. That's what I call the inside ferrule hole, because that's gonna drill all the way through from the back to the front, and it's gonna line up with these guys. And then that's what that number is. So that's what that number is. Okay, again, 10 days is a lifetime. So I'm gonna close out and I'm gonna just actually go into the inside one. That's my depth, that's my start. Huh. I don't remember what size I made that though. So this is again why I don't delete stuff. So let's go over to body 3 vectors. And if I go over to that one, I can see that I made it 0.15 inches. This is why I don't delete things, folks. So I could actually just copy that right over if I want to, but I'm gonna show you what I did just so it can be more confusing and less confusing all at the same time. 0.15, I measured the hole on the bridge. That's how I got that number. So we'll change that to 0.15. Now I'm excited. We'll hit apply and you'll see that it lines up perfectly because I'm awesome. And then we're just gonna copy it over again 5 times. You could use the pattern tool. I guess I should probably show it off, but I'm just feeling lazy today. So the more I do these videos, the more I realize I'm actually really like, I don't know if it's efficient or lazy. Take your pick, but either way, we are going to, again, center everything. So we're gonna grab our thing, or 2 holes, we're gonna align them. That one's bang on already. We're gonna grab them, align them. This is where maybe that spacing or the pattern one would come in handy because I wouldn't have to do this every time, but then you have to figure out what it is all over again. And these videos already run long, so maybe I'll just come up with like a tips and tricks video so that it's its own special thing. There we are. So these are the holes that are gonna go, we've done basically our surface of our guitar, we cut out the lip for the ferrule, we cut out the depth of the ferrule, and now we're gonna cut the through hole that goes through to the bridge. And that depth is, the way we find that out is, if we remember, we were in here and our start depth, that's the wrong one. Our middle, so there was our start depth, that's the bottom of the ferrule. And now I just need to cut all the way through the rest of the guitar. So bottom of our ferrule plus that. Let's just add those numbers together so I can see what's going on. So 1172 plus 0.37 gives us 0.48. So we're almost ½ an inch into this piece of wood, and we know that it's 1.75 inches. So if I went 1 1/4, it should punch all the way through. Now the problem with that is a standard 1/8 inch bit will have a very tricky time going 1 1/4 inches deep. So I'm gonna copy this number because that's my new start depth, and that's cool. And then I'm gonna try and remember what I did to figure this out, because I only have 7. I don't remember why 0.75 inches was the number that I started with, but maybe I went back after and I just didn't change it. You know what? Let's leave it at 3/4 of an inch. I know why. Because if I'm almost ½ an inch plus 3/4 of an inch, that's almost 1 1/4 inches. That's what I did. I really should have recorded this 10 days ago and it was all fresh, but here we are. That's what I did. So you may actually have to bump that up just a little wee bit to punch it all the way through, but because the 3D model goes through on the other side, because I left those divots in, I think it ended up punching through just fine. Did it? It didn't. It went down, it didn't punch through. So you know what I'm gonna have to do? I'm gonna make it just a little bit deeper to try and make sure, because we're down by what? To get that to 1/2 inch, you got 0.12, so add 0.12, so 0.75. I think this is why I was nervous. I think that's what I did. I went short because I didn't want to burn the surface. Like, yeah, I knew it was gonna burn the surface, that's why. So, this is a tricky one. I mean, at the end of the day, you could copy these holes over to the front side and drill through just a little tiny bit to make up that difference. I'm gonna live on the edge and I'm gonna make this, what did I say, 0.12, so it would be 0.87. I'm gonna make that 0.87 deep and see what happens. You guys, the good news about watching this video is you're gonna see whether or not it worked. And I will let you know. And at the end of it, we're either gonna be really happy because it did work, or we're gonna be really sad because there's a burn mark on the back of my guitar. I'm gonna have to sand it, so hopefully there's not much of a burn mark. Inside, ramps, it's in the order it needs to be, it's labeled. We're gonna hit calculate. I don't have them selected because I talk and work at the same time, which is just a terrible habit. It's a true, genuine talent being able to do both. Calculate. We're gonna go back to our preview. What happened? I lost my preview. Oh well. You'll see, actually, this is a really good time to do this. We're gonna flip on our two-sided, and I'm going to do the roughing. Let's just do the finishing one, ready? So if we do this finishing one, and then go back, we're gonna see that it did this. Now, at the end of the day, I'm not gonna do the other ferrule holes. I just wanna do this inside one, because I wanna see if this punches through to the other side. So we're gonna preview selected. We're gonna see that it does some business. And then if we flip on our two-sided, where'd it go? It's not doing what it's supposed to do right now. I thought it was gonna show if it went all the way through. Why is, oh, because I have my preview, not that guy. I do this pretty regularly. If you have your preview up and you're trying to see the double-sided thing, this little guy here, this toggle between single and double, it won't show you. And it takes me a second and I'm looking at it trying to figure out why. That's why. So if we get out of our preview, yeah, see, there we go. And then we turn our double-sided on, it will work. And I'm just flipping it over. Yeah, I see daylight. There we go. So if you are in your preview mode and you're trying to flip on the double-sided to see what's going on and it's not showing you, it's because you're in preview. So just close out of that and then your double-sided will show you. So the reason I was doing that is I want to see if this is going to go all the way through with this 0.87 that I did. It looks like it is. I bet you if I put it back to 0.75, it'll just be hanging there. I might take like a, well, a drill bit would be smart, but I might take like a paper clip and just poke those to see if it was that close or if it was far off. You guys get the benefit of sitting back with your popcorn and laughing at me as I make mistakes. Other than that, the only other vector we have to create before we save all of these out, and saving them out is the same as we always do, and that's again why my naming convention is what it is, so that when I go to load it in GSender, it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it leaves me 26 options, which is quite a bit, so that's why I named things the way I did. The only other thing we need to make do with now is making the neck plate. And then again, part of the reason I ended up going with a vector and an end mill specifically for this neck plate was, so the edge of this neck plate has a pretty square corner on the bottom side, which is where it's gonna rest on in this neck pocket. And when we use the ball nose, because it's got like a radius on it, that's what you end up with in the bottom of that pocket. So your neck plate is gonna wanna sit in there nice and sharp square, but you have a radius. So we have to go in with an end mill to kind of carve out just that little tiny radius that's left by the ball nose. Again, it's one of those things, it is what it is. So you would select your neck plate vector that we originally brought in from Onshape. That's why it's really nice having this kind of back and forth relationship. You would select your profile toolpath and you would end up with this coming up. I'm gonna now select it because there we go. So my start depth, I'm gonna have to go in and figure out what my start depth is. So my start depth for this one, again, my material changed. This is why when I said in that first video, have your material and then make your testers the same dimension. This is why I said it, because I've redone this project so many times because I didn't have my material spec'd to my final. And I'm hoping that by telling you guys that, you'll go, oh, now that's why he did it. and it'll save you all kinds of headache because I'm kind of having to relearn this even as I've done it. Anyway, so my start depth on this guy is going to be, I'm trying to figure out why it's 0.0625. It's probably because my material is a different thickness than this one. I want this to go down to the surface of the guitar, right? So here's my surface of the guitar, and then we're gonna carve down for the neck pocket. Now, that's why, see? We're getting there. No, are we getting there? Yeah, we're getting there. When the 3D model did it, it's already carved some of this out, but I still want this to be my start surface, right? The surface of my guitar is still my start, and then my neck pocket, or the neck plate is gonna go kind of like this. So we need to measure the thickness of this, and we're gonna tell it to start at the surface of the guitar, and it's gonna go down this thickness. If I told it to go down this thickness from the start of the wood, it would be like up here, and it's not gonna go down far enough. So that's why this little tool of being able to hover over here is super special, right? So the 0.0472 is where we're gonna tell it to start. 0.0472 is where it's gonna start, and it's gonna go down, this says 0.07 inches. I don't know if that's right or not. It's almost like I measured this once. It is 0.07 inches for my neck plate. Again, this is why calipers, having your materials on hand, you can spec it as you're going through. So we used an 1/8 inch end mill for this, just like we did for the ferrule holes, because I want square corners out of this, not rounded radiuses like a ball nose. I believe my settings were still very conservative because, again, in particular, going around this part here, hold on, give me it, yeah. Going around this really skinny edge made me nervous. I didn't want to snap it out, especially because I was using pine. I'm hoping the hardwood version will be a little more robust. I have my plunge moves on. I have it in my order. I have it listed as the neck plate with what size, an 1/8 and an end mill, and I'm going to hit calculate right there. And then I'm going to deselect this and I'm going to hit preview sides, and you'll see, or not preview all sides, I'm gonna preview the toolpath. You'll see that, I know the preview is kind of rough. You'll see this radius right here is gonna clean up to a nice square edge, which is, it looks the same. In real life, the radius, the roundness, will turn to a squareness, which is exactly what you need for that to slide in there. Depending on your neck plate, I'm not gonna lie, I did actually tweak this a number of times because I went, with the 3D model brought in, this wouldn't fit in exactly. I measured it, I spec'd it, and even with my vector, I still had to tweak it just a little tiny bit. So again, it's cool because it's in place, you're already zeroed. If you have to come back and offset this by, we're talking like a thou or something like that, you do that and you redo it, and we're literally shaving it off. Or you could sandpaper it out. I mean, there are different ways to get the same result. I just went at it until it slid in there nicely, and then I had to use a screwdriver to actually pop it back out because I had nothing to pick it up by. So that is that. And last but certainly not least are the holes for this. And if I'm being totally honest, my memory is failing me, but I feel like I just lined them up with what the 3D model holes were. It's drilling through the back of the body into the neck, which has no holes in the back of the neck whatsoever. I figured I was pretty safe that if these holes are not identical, that I'm going to carve them to the size I want. And again, it's not a $1,500 fender, so if it's not perfect, I was willing to live with that. If you really want to spec the business out of this, you can go back into Onshape, you can import those vectors and line it up with that, and then you're, a thousandth better than I've done. If I was more patient, I would do it. I'm not. So I'm going to cheat and I'm going to go back to my last version. And you can see that I drew these up. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that this was my offset. So this might be the original one, and I think this was my final one. So I may end up having to do the same thing again, because that was my original one. Yeah, I think that's what I did. This was, so you can see here, this was probably the original one I brought in from Onshape. And this one that's offset by just a tiny little bit, that was the one that I found fit this perfectly. So I'm probably just gonna copy that over. Either way, the process is the same. I have these grouped and I am super lazy, so I'm actually just going to copy them to the main sheet. And then when I go back to my main sheet, you will see, there they are. Now, very clearly, they're not lined up with what the model's telling me. This is what I was just talking about. I'm pretty comfortable with saying, you know what, let's just nudge them down, let's nudge them over, and it's probably gonna survive. It's probably gonna be okay. If you're wondering what size they are, I can ungroup them and I can tell you by selecting one. and drawing a circle, and they are 0.166 inches. I think I measured the screws that came with my neck plate. That's where that number came from. So I grabbed my calipers, I measured that, and I probably actually made it just a tiny little bit smaller, which is why it's a weird number, just to make sure those screws had a little bit of something to bite into. I obviously don't want to crack. This is going to go all the way through the body. And if I'm not mistaken, I may have grabbed a drill bit and just given the back of the neck a little bit of zip, 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 zip. Just a touch so it didn't split anything. So these are going to bite in just a little bit. Again, spec your screws, make these holes the right size, and then just place them there. And that was pretty much all I did for those. I'm going to, you would draw your circles, place them. You would go and you would create a profile toolpath, and it would bring something that looks like this up. And again, I'm gonna have to go and reselect mine, which is cool. And my start depth is going to be from the bottom of where this guy is. So my surface of my guitar plus my, what did I say, 0.07 to the bottom of the plate is going to be my start depth for these. So my memory is not good enough. So what did I say? 0.0472 plus 0.07 gives me, oh yeah, that number. I've already used that one. Either way, there is my start depth. My cut depth is going to be, and again, this is a bit of a tricky one. You're gonna have to, you just gotta pay attention to how much of your bit you have hanging out. I'm not gonna lie. Another tip that I had was when I was loading these in, because my material was just a little too thick, or it was making me nervous. After I had my bit in my collet and I hadn't cranked it down, I actually busted out a tape measure and made sure I had the depth that I needed on my bit in there, and then I tightened it down so that I could punch through, because standard bit I believe is 1.5 inches. I'm not gonna lie, I ran this a few times with like 1 1/8 inches of my bit hanging out, so there wasn't much holding on. I know it's not the right way to do it. My longer 1/8 inch bits had not come in yet, and there we were. So I'm saying 1.065 to punch all the way through. That did actually happen. That should be good. We're gonna go inside. We have ramps on, and we are going to hit calculate. It's going to do those. Again, we preview them, and that's just gonna show us that it did a punch all the way through. The thing that we have to consider is that it's already carved into the neck pocket, right? So on the front side, it's already carved that chunk of the neck pocket out, so it doesn't actually have to go through the, do I have one? Hold on, I have one. You can show that it only has to go through this thickness, right? From in here to through here. It doesn't have to go to the surface of this. So basically, if you can just measure this, that'll tell you how deep you have to go. I can ballpark it right here on the spot. And because mine broke, I actually know kind of what it is. So this is telling me it is 0.9 inches. So 0.9 inches, you should be able to get pretty easily out of your bit when it's mounted. So let's actually go back and change that. 1.06. Whoop. 0.9 inches. We'll hit calculate, and then we'll hit close. So saving our toolpaths is the same as it always is. We will select, we will hit save. It's visible, save your toolpath to whatever folder you wanna go. I'm gonna go body 4 on this. I'm gonna go G code, and they're probably already there. Yep, there they are. So you just go through one by one, save your toolpaths until you have them all in there. And that is kind of it. I hope that that all made sense. I know it was a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of mishmash, but it was what worked for me. Again, if it doesn't work for you, or you know a better way, or you find a better way, let us know. Make sure you're subscribed too, so that we can find out about what you're saying. Next, we're gonna run into G-Sender, and we're gonna start carving this thing. So my nerves are gonna be shot by the end of this, because that's an expensive chunk of wood, and I don't wanna make a mistake. But that is it for your front side, your back side, and your toolpaths. And now we're gonna rock and roll. Stick around. Here we are, folks. I'm gonna show you my setup and how I, to some degree, remember what I did. A lot of it's going to be basics from stuff we've done before, but I'll run you through it anyways. I have some clamps here. I call them kind of temporary because I did end up screwing my material down. I just found it gave me a really strong hold, and these clamps were just a little wee bit short to make me feel comfortable. So first things first, I am going to square my material up. And again, I'm gonna throw these on kind of temporarily just until I get my process going. And the reason why I say process is I end up with G-Sender and the indexing holes file open, and then I'm gonna kind of trace out where they go just to make sure that I'm not overlapping on my screws, because it kind of almost happened with one of the bodies and it made me a little nervous. So we're gonna clamp this guy down. Again, they can stay on, they're not hurting anything, but at the end of the day, they're not really doing anything once it's screwed in. Clamp down. I'm gonna jog the machine over here. I'm gonna throw in my 1/4 inch ball nose. I already have G-Sender open and it is connected. My machine is good to go. So I'm going to jog this guy down here. Here comes a squeak. Oh, it didn't squeak this time. Again, just roughly into place so that I can now throw in my 1/4 inch ball nose. There we go. There goes my bit. And because this is not going super deep, right? We're not carving all the way through the material. I tend to have a good bit of the shank on. I'm still going to grab my tape measure, and I still want to make sure that I've got like at least an inch. So I've got 1 5/8. I've got a good bit. Yeah, a good bit. I have a good amount of the bit hanging out. Where'd my wrenches go? There they are. I'll give this a little crank. Ding. I'll put those away, and now I'm just going to zero, just like we normally would with your auto zero or your normal touch plate. Get that guy on there, hold it in place. We got to get it over. I'm gonna move this down a little bit. There we go, and I'm gonna slow it down just so I don't ram it through there by accident. I don't know if you guys do that, but I turn it down to precise when I'm moving it in that orientation, just so I have a little bit more time to do what I need to do. There we go. And we are going to get our X, Y, and our Z, and we are going to put it, I put it as tip for this because it's not in end mill. We hit probe. It's waiting for that connectivity right there. Green light, go. Start the probe. Awesome. So we have our zero now. Like I said, I have the indexing hole file open, and I'm just going to outline it. I'm gonna have a pencil in my hand, and when it shows me where it's going to draw these index holes, or sorry, where it's gonna carve these index holes, I'm just gonna draw a little circle on the surface, just so that I know where roughly it's gonna be, so that when I go to put my screws in, and I'm pre-drilling, I know that I've got not only enough space between the edges of the material and my screw, so it doesn't blow out, but also so it's not gonna overlap with what I am doing with my index hole. So I've got my file open. I'm just gonna hit the outline button, and you'll see what I do. Again, this doesn't have to be super accurate. Right there is where one hole is going to be. Right there is where another hole is going to be. And right there is going to be where the last hole is. So now I know where my index holes are going to be. Yeah, you're going to run through and just tell me they were happy. Now I know index hole 1, 2, and 3 are there. I can put in my actual screws to hold this thing in place. So I'm just gonna bounce this guy a little bit out of my way to make my life a little easier. And I'm gonna do that by raising the bit so I don't drag it across anything. Sliding it over. And now I've got room to work on both sides. So I'm just gonna pre-drill. I'll come and do these guys over here. Did I go too far? No, I got enough room. Because I know that my guitar, right? So if the one index hole is here, I know the guitar is gonna kind of do a this shape. And come back around and come back over here. So I know that I've got these corners, again, not only from experience, but I've got 4 corners that are pretty easy to work with. There we go. Pre-drilling so that the material in my wasteboard and the material that is being held down, that the wood's not displacing it, and the first time I've done this in hardwood, so I'm thinking about something in advance. I don't necessarily, these 3, I'm not worried about the bit or my touch plate being an issue, but I may have to countersink this one, because if I have that screw head sitting up above the surface, when I go to 0, because I'm gonna have to use just my Z function quite a number of times, I gotta make sure that that's out of the way. With Pine, it was easy, I just drove it in. With these guys, I think I may have to get a countersink bit and just drop them below the surface just a little bit, just that one. So let's do this last hole anyways, because, yeah, I'm gonna have to do that. I was thinking I might trace the outline of the guitar so I can see what I'm doing, but I'm just going to countersink this one. It moved. You bugger. That's all right. We can force it back into place. At least it's now and not later. So maybe there's another tip that I just came up with. Put a couple of screws in while it hasn't moved. So we'll drop one in. And while you're doing this, even though we've pre-drilled, keep an eye on where, here, I'll come over here. When you're dropping the screw in, keep an eye on your material and your wasteboard, because even though you've pre-drilled it, sometimes it's gonna cause separation between the two. So just keep an eye on it. And if it does do that, drop your screw in, and if it raises up, back your screw off, because it's now created a hole, and then drive it back through, and it should suck it back together. So let's see if it cooperates or doesn't cooperate. See how it lifted up just a little tiny bit, like we're talking a millimeter. So I'm going to continue driving it, and then I'm going to back it off and watch it'll drop back down. Just, we're talking tiny amounts here, tiny. But now that the screw hole is already there, it should suck it in. And even if you put a little bit of pressure on it, should be good to go. Yep, nice and tight on the surface. Keeping an eye on it. And if I'm being totally honest, this black Limba is really cool. I've never worked with it before. The guy, actually the founder of Exotic Woods, John himself, was talking about how much he likes black Limba and he uses it for turning bowls. So I thought I'd give it a whirl. It's got a really nice pattern to it. So it's quite a bit softer, if I'm being honest, than I was expecting it to be for a hardwood, but we're gonna make it work. A little bit of pressure on it. You see it lift up just a tiny bit. Like, I mean, we're splitting hairs, but it'll go down just a little. Just like, it's a tiny bit. I'm being picky. And I don't actually have to countersink it, because even though it's a hardwood, it's still, that's flush enough to the surface that I can just drive this one in, and then we are gonna be off and running. Now, I am being pretty gentle as I'm feathering that in there, but I do want to make sure it's nice and flush, because when I flip this guy over, I want to make sure that, yep, there's nothing impeding it. There's nothing moving it up and down, because the last thing we want to do is affect our Z-axis height. So I'm just going to, give that just a little bit more, just to make sure. There we go. Moving on from here, I am going to run that index hole one. We'll probably, I mean, it's a really quick carve. The next one after that is going to be the front roughing pass. Because we do not a lot of, but we do a fair amount of bit changes, I got really used to just making sure that I actually brought it back to 0, 0, 0. A lot of the times you hit your X and your Y 0 and it's cool and it'll come back to here, but it loses, not that it loses Z, but I don't want to take the chance. I always try and double check things. So I'll drop it down to 0, 0, and 0 on my Z just to make sure it's going back to where it's supposed to, because I'd rather be safe than sorry. And then I manually will bump it up just so that it's not sitting on the surface. I'm not tearing things through. So that's, another hint is get very familiar, get very comfortable with your bit changes and with making sure you're double, triple, quadruple checking your 0, 0, 0. That will come in very handy, especially if you aren't able to carve one guitar in a whole day, which I didn't. I always, every single time, moved when I was done for the day, I moved it back to 0, 0, 0, and I left it there. So that way, even if you hit your E-stop and you shut your machine down and it loses connection, you know that it's at the 0, 0, 0 that you started with, and you don't have to guess. You don't have to worry. And on top of that, when I came back in the next day and I unlocked my machine and I reconnected, I still hit re-zero all. I didn't re-zero, I re-zero. The button says 0 all. At the end of the day, I re-zeroed and I actually tested it. I moved it up and down, but I didn't lose my Z, or at least I knew what the dimensions were. I was really paranoid because with one of the ones that I did, I lost my 0 and I spent probably 30, 40 minutes trying to guess back to where it was. So another big hint, in my opinion, leave it at 0, 0, 0 as often as you can. Make sure you hit re-zero a whole bunch of times. I actually have a piece of paper that I used to put on top of my keyboard with my mouse on top so I couldn't forget. And just be very cognizant of that, because it will save you a lot of headaches. It would really suck to carve the front and then, you turn your machine off and you lose your 0, and then when you flipped it to your back, you're guessing again. Don't even want to go there. The last hint that I forgot about because I jumped up a little bit. Again, we may have to reorder this when we do it, but it is what it is. You can do this before. No, do it after you screw it down. Do it after you screw it down. Is I take a pencil and I actually trace the outline. You can see this? I trace the outline and I go against the corner so that it kind of makes a little flick. You can see how my pencil jumps and there's a little, it purposely forces where that corner is. And I do that all the way around. So you'll see my pencil jump, my pencil jumps. I know that that's my corners. I did it all the way around. Pencil jumps, and then right here, pencil jumps, pencil jumps. I'll give my edges too, just so I have them. Not as crucial because my corners are kind of what I'm going by. And the reason I do that, again, even though we know where 0, 0 is, it's just one more safeguard. Watching some of the other tutorials that other guys have done, they'll mark their material itself and then they'll mark their tables if that's the way they do it, so that if they do lose something, they can go back to it. It's registration. It's like a print thing. This is the same to me. Is when I go to flip it, if for some reason my screw wants to move it, I can say no, and I can put a different screw hole in. I know that those are my corners. I know where it's supposed to be. I know I'm flipping it square. It's just another safeguard. Just another hint. You can do it. You can not do it. I found it saved me a couple of times and it was well worth it for the 10 seconds it took. From here, now we're going to get to some carving. We're going to pop out those index holes and then we're going to move on. Stay tuned. So we've got our index holes carved out. It took all of 30 seconds to do it. I will give a disclaimer. If you guys hear the on and off banging or whooshing of sound, it's because it's minus 23 out today with the wind chill. And we can't turn the furnace off because it's just too cold. It's chilly in here with my furnace on. So if you hear some sounds and you're not really sure what they are, it's because we're not freezing to death. Moving on from there, we are going to load up our next file, which is... Again, this is why my naming convention is, or a naming convention I find is really important, because now I don't have to look at this list and guess or search for my next file. I know my second file is letter B. There it is. It is going to be the roughing pass. Bing. We double click it. That outline looks good. For safety's sake and just to make sure, I mean, again, I know my 0 is good because I just did it. If you want to hit the outline button, we'll hit the outline button. It's going to show you, it'll take a little bit to load, like a couple seconds, because it is a fair amount of G-code in there. It's just going to trace the outline of the guitar and where it's going to go. I'm fairly confident in what's happening, but just to be sure. Something to note, if you haven't used the outline function before, it is not going to trace an exact outline of the exact shape. It's going to do the extents of it. So if you notice, like right across here where the neck was, it didn't do the swoop of the neck and come back up. It just went from the high point to the high point. So it drew a straight line across. So it's giving you the outline, but not an actual perfect outline. I'm reasonably happy with that. The file's loaded. I think this one's about a half an hour carve. So we're going to fire the machine up, fire up the dust collector, let this thing go, and when we come back after a really sweet time lapse, we're going to have the roughing pass done, and we're going to switch over to an 1/8 inch bit. Stick around! see the roughing pass went really well. I'm trying not to be like a kid in a candy store right now, but I'm super excited about this. I'm not gonna lie. The grain on this wood is so cool. It's so unique. It machines really nicely. Like, I mean, there's a little tiny blowout there, but we can live with that. At the end of the day, this orange, whatever you want to call it, occlusion, I guess, whatever. I purposely actually cut this piece of wood down so that we could get that on there, because originally the piece of wood was wider and we were going to lose a good portion of it. And I said to Louis, no way, it's too cool. It machined really well. It's clean. The next thing we're going to do is run into the finishing pass. For all of the pine bodies I did, I used a 1.5 inch long, 1/8 inch ball nose. I decided to go out and source some longer ones. There are 2 inches versus 1.5 inches. And it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when we're talking about getting into the bottom of these pockets and doing some of these things, I want to see if this longer bit's going to make my life a little bit easier, because like I said, I was grabbing a tape measure and like getting nervous every time I went near there, because it did burn the surface, and this piece is right on 1 3/4. I don't have a lot of room to play, so I'm going to use this longer bit, and I'm hoping they work just as nicely as the shorter ones do. I'll report back if I'm crying the next time you see me on this video. It's because something happened. I think we're good to go. We're going to load up the file just like we did before. We're going to change the bit over. We're going to re-zero, and then I'm going to let the 3-hour video, well, it's not going to be 3 hours for you guys, but it's going to be 3 hours for us real time. So let's change this bit over, and then we'll get rock and rolling. That sucker, that's a big one. Technically speaking, I could have just hit. I have to get this. File's loaded. This. No, I don't want to do that. I'm terrified of losing my XY. Right now I can see exactly.
If you go to the left, you
I won't. I'm just paranoid. It'll be just fine, but if I lose it, then what do I do? Right? So you laugh, but when it happens to you, you'll be like, oh, that's why Scott does that. Yeah.
You guys, don't go to the left. Go to the right.
It says right there, see?
When nothing goes right, go left. Yeah, go left always. Right.
Let's start with me. Just work your camera magic, would you?
I'm doing it.
So, as you can see here, we have the front of the guitar carved. I am absolutely thrilled. There is some amount of tooling marks in it, you know, some of these little swirlies. That happened in all of the tests that I did, so I assume that there's, again, some way that everything gets interpreted that's there. But I mean, at the end of the day, if that's what I have to sand out after a finished carve, I'm okay with that. It's pretty good. What we're going to go on to now is the indexing and the flip. This is where some people get tripped up. I think I've simplified it enough so that it is pretty easy to follow. The first step is we took off the clamps and we unscrewed our material. Again, like I said, when I drew those lines, I did those for a reason, because just in case you lose your XYZ0, you want to make sure that you have something to go back to and refer to. So at the end of the day, I could drop the screws back in and I could line this up and it would go pretty close back. We could pull out our zero touch plate and we could find our zero again. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but you know, things happen. I have already gone ahead and switched back to my 1/4 inch ball nose, which we are going to use to now, I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it. We're going to take it off the table. We're going to get rid of it for now. Stay there, my precious. And we are going to bring our router back to 0, 0, 0. All I have to do is hit go to XY0. It should work. And then I'm going to go to my Z0, which I know is the surface of where my material should be. And just to be paranoid and double, triple, quadruple check, because, you know, that's how things go, I should be able to slide that basically right into place. So that's good. I'm happy with that. I know that it's where it's supposed to be. All we have to do now is open up the file that we saved that is going into the wasteboard. So this is why we did that tell at the start point, because we don't want it to start here drilling and then go down 0.5 inches. We want it to start drilling here and go down 0.55 inches. So that's all we did there. We just eliminated this. Again, you could always add that 0.55 to here, whatever this height is, and you could get the same thing, but then it's doing a whole bunch of movements for no reason. We have that file loaded, the into wasteboard file, and we are going to run this. It's going to take 13 seconds to go through. Another tip, if you are not going to try and save your wasteboard, which I had no intentions on mine looking like Swiss cheese, but it does. I've gone ahead and you can see that I've marked all the ones that I've already used just with red marker, because I don't want to get confused by all the Swiss cheese that's on here. So I marked them all with red marker. Again, there's a million different ways to do this. This is just what's working for me. These are going to get swapped out pretty soon. And we're going to run this file. And after that, we're going to load up our roughing pass for the back. We're going to screw this sucker back down and we're going to go to town. Let's let her carve. So, with any amount of luck, I've done this enough times and I actually know what I'm doing. We're going to take our dowels. Again, these are cut at about 1 inch long because of the depth that we're cutting. And we're going to stick them into these. Ooh, I made these tighter than last time, so I may have to give these a little taparoo with a hammer. We're going to go there, there, and there. The other thing I did is I broke the corners of them with some sandpaper. And then last but not least, and I'm going to give them a little tap with a hammer if I'm being honest. The other good news is when we put this piece of wood back on, if we can see they're not sitting flush, then I can whack them with a hammer some more. I can make the depth cut, or I can change the depth of the cut if I really want to. I haven't had to do that yet. So this is also why I recommended heavily that we do some weird pattern, because if they happen to be here and, you know, whatever, we did something weird and you could make a mistake, you wouldn't know with your indexing holes. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that when I put this on, if it fits, it's the right way. If it doesn't fit, I did something wrong. So it can be a little tricky to line them up. There's one. Keeps dropping, that one keeps dropping. Mouth. So we just finished drilling the holes in the wasteboard for our index. We dropped in our dowels. We flipped the board over, or we flipped our material over, and we drilled it in, we screwed it in. And apparently I still have some things to learn, which shouldn't come as a big surprise to anybody. When I told you earlier to grab your pencil and, you know, do your jumpy, jumpy, jumpy at the corners, now that we have it screwed down, we're seeing that it's not so liney, liney, liney uppy. What we're thinking is happening here is that there's just kind of a cumulative effect of, you know, maybe my table saw is not perfectly square. We're gaining some, we're losing some. The index holes lined up perfectly. When we drop that thing on there, it's suctioned down like a vacuum. Our 0 is still where it's supposed to be originally because we're still good with G-Sender. As long as your index holes line up, as long as you don't lose your 0, carve away, folks. It's going to be okay. It's a little, you know, gut check time and you feel kind of gross. Carve it. You're going to be all right.
Are you saying that to our audience or for yourself?
Moment of truth here, folks. We finished cutting out the rough, the final, the finish, the ferrule holes. I did a little end milling on this back neck plate to make sure that everything was nice and sharp and smooth. Sharp and smooth? You get what I'm saying. I wanted it to fit in there nice and flush. We did the profile outline, which is my, whole hybrid method of carving this guy out. Instead of just hand packing all the way along, or instead of just cutting it and then going back with a hand router, we're using a little bit of both. Let's show things off. So, moment of truth. I have unscrewed this from my wasteboard. I have not actually looked at it. I'm kind of terrified because there was a little bit of stress when we did the flippy and it didn't line up the way it was. And like we say, it appears to be some sort of kind of cumulative effect of millimeter here, millimeter there, angle here, degree there. Chatted with Andy actually about that. And he asked if I thought it would be helpful if he did a video on, degree and margin of error and things like that. And I was very honest with him. I said, yeah, I think that'd be really nice and helpful because it helped me out chatting with him. And learning process, this is now the 4th body I've done, and I still clearly have quite a bit to learn. My process is good, but I still have things to learn. So, talked enough. Let's see what she looks like. I'm hoping that this lined up nicely. There we go. And I don't even want to look. How's it look? Oh, baby. I'm looking through. I'm seeing very nice, clean lines. Yep. This is pretty bang on from what I can see. I mean, now whether or not it's twisted, we're going to find that out in the near future. But my nice rounded edges went all the way over and my profile cut it all out. It's looking pretty good. I'm quite pleased, and it's such a cool looking piece of wood that how can it not look awesome? So where do we go from here? From here, I'm just going to run this over to my bandsaw and chop it free from the form. And then I'm going to go to town on sanding. So I'm going to set up some cameras and show you guys that process. Woohoo! Folks, here we are at the end of this part 2 of our guitar building journey, carving journey, whatever you want to call it. I still don't have a cool name. We've showed you how to do front and back, all the tool paths, how to actually carve the beast out, and the last little chunk was about all the sanding that I did. So nothing too crazy going on there. Just tried to get some of those swirlies out of it. There was some tool marks left in it after we finished carving, and it literally took next to no time whatsoever. I went from, I believe, 180, 220 or 240, 320, and this is to 400. It feels silky smooth. I'm thrilled with it. Honestly, I don't have any issues with it so far. I haven't decided what kind of finish I'm going to put on it. Probably something natural like a Rubio or a Ligna or something. I don't really feel the need to go into a polyurethane or anything like heavy duty because I kind of like that natural woody feel, and I feel like it's going to get a really nice vintage as I start to play it. So I'm thrilled. Guitar body is done. For now. I probably will take it up a couple more with sandpaper. I'll probably go up to 600 or maybe 800. Do I need to? No. Do I want to? Maybe. We'll see how I feel in, another week's time. Coming up, part 3 will be about building a neck from scratch. If we thought the body was tricky, the neck is not too far off. There's just a lot to it, but it's the exact same process. We grab a model, we import it in, we do some cool things, we use some vectors to help carve things out that didn't carve as nicely as I'd like, and my hybrid theory comes all back again. So, I don't think there's anything else rocking. I hope you found this super helpful. I know it was long, I know I talk too much, I know I'm hyper, but I really am. This is like a thrill of a lifetime for me. So I hope that's coming across for you guys. I hope you're as excited as I am. If you have any comments, chuck them down below. Keep them nice because we're all still learning. You know, make sure you hit that subscribe and the like button and all those awesome buttons down there, the dings for all the things, because you don't want to miss out part 3, which is the neck. And I've said enough for now. We'll see you around the CNC. Thanks for watching. Alrighty, folks. Here are. Go ahead, make fun of me. Oh, I gotta clap.